The bells of House Varelis did not ring for weddings. They rang for executions. Their iron voices rolled across the frozen cliffs of the kingdom like funeral drums, heavy enough to silence even the wolves pacing beneath the palace walls. Snow fell through the black night in slow spirals, gathering upon the shoulders of nobles dressed in silver fur and dark ceremonial armor, as they filled the royal courtyard below the moon throne. At the center of the stone platform stood the bride. White silk clung to her thin body beneath chains of blessed silver wrapped around her wrists. Her dark hair had come loose during the procession, spilling across the front of her gown like spilled ink. Snow melted against her skin, but she did not tremble. Not when the crowd spat curses at her. Not when the priests painted death runes across her throat. Not even when the coffin was brought forward. Lyra Vale stared at it quietly. Black wood, silver nails, moon sigils carved into every side. A coffin meant not only to bury the dead, but to imprison what lived after death. The royal court watched her, with the fascination reserved for monsters moments before slaughter, because everyone in Varelis knew the story of the king's cursed bride, the girl born without a living wolf, the silent child whose shadow moved strangely in moonlight. The woman servants claimed never cast a reflection after midnight. The one wolves whimpered around. 3 nights ago, the northern villages had burned beneath unnatural crimson fire. Livestock had been torn apart. Children disappeared from their beds. Entire packs swore they heard growling beneath the earth itself. And tonight, the high priestess had given the kingdom its answer. The curse wore a bridal gown. King Kael Draven stood above her on the throne platform carved from black stone and wolf bone. Snow gathered in the dark fur lining his shoulders while torchlight flickered across the sharp planes of his face. He looked less like a king, and more like the last thing men saw before battlefields turned red. Feared, untouched, cold enough to freeze prayer itself. His silver eyes rested on Lyra without warmth, without mercy. Yet something dangerous lingered beneath that stillness tonight. Something strained. The priestess stepped forward first. High Priestess Selene wore robes stitched with old moon scripture, her pale hands folded before her like claws hidden beneath silk. Her voice echoed through the courtyard. Lyra Vale, daughter of the dead bloodline of Norhollow, you stand accused of carrying the hollow wolf inside your soul. Murmurs spread through the crowd. The hollow wolf, ancient devourer of kingdoms, the beast said to feed on betrayal and death, a creature sealed beneath the palace mountain nearly 4 centuries ago. Selene's eyes sharpened upon Lyra. Do you deny the curse? Lyra remained silent, not because she feared them, because she had not spoken a word in 11 years. The court took her silence as guilt. They always did. Selene lifted her chin toward the throne. Your Majesty, the kingdom awaits judgment. King Kael descended the stone steps slowly. Every movement carried restrained violence. The wolves surrounding the courtyard lowered themselves instinctively as he approached the chained bride. Even the soldiers avoided breathing too loudly near him. Lyra kept her gaze lowered, but she felt him stop before her, felt the unbearable weight of his presence. 3 months ago, she had been dragged from the northern monastery and informed she would marry the Alpha King of Varelis. No explanation, no choice, only whispers. The king needs a cursed bride. Now she understood why. He had never intended to keep her alive. Kael reached forward suddenly. Gasps spread through the court as his gloved fingers tilted her chin upward. For the first time that night, their eyes met, and something impossible happened. Pain crossed his face. Brief, sharp, gone almost instantly. But Lyra saw it. So did the priestess. Selene's expression darkened. Your Majesty, she warned softly. Kael's jaw tightened. The air around him carried the scent of winter storms and blood beneath moonlight. His wolf stirred violently inside him at her touch. He could feel it clawing against his ribs like a starving beast desperate to reach her. Impossible. His wolf had not reacted to another soul in years. Not since the first mate bond shattered and nearly destroyed him. Yet this silent girl, no. He crushed the thought immediately. The kingdom already balanced upon collapse. The northern rebellions were growing stronger. The council questioned his bloodline, and beneath the palace mountain, something ancient had begun waking again. He could not afford weakness, especially not for her. Kale released her chin abruptly. The sentence stands. The crowd erupted in relieved cheers. Lyra did not move, but somewhere beneath the courtyard stones, something growled. The sound vibrated faintly through the earth. Several wolves whimpered. Celine's face paled for half a second before composure returned. "Seal the coffin," she ordered. Soldiers forced Lyra toward it. Still, she did not fight. That unsettled them more than screaming would have. A servant girl would beg. A guilty woman would curse them. But Lyra only glanced once toward the dark sky above the palace towers, as though listening. The coffin lid opened. Darkness waited inside. One soldier shoved her hard enough that she stumbled against the edge, her bare hand scraping across one of the silver runes. The symbol instantly cracked. A pulse of crimson light flashed beneath the wood. The nearest wolves began snarling. The crowd recoiled. Celine's voice rose sharply. "Nail it shut now." Fear spread through the soldiers. They forced Lyra inside. Silver chains wrapped around her wrists and throat. The lid slammed closed. Then came the nails. 1, 2, 3. Each strike echoed across the courtyard like a death sentence from the gods themselves. Inside the coffin, Lyra closed her eyes. Darkness swallowed everything. But beneath the silence, she heard breathing. Not her own. Deep, ancien, hungry. A voice slid through the blackness like claws across stone. "You finally came back to me." Lyra's breath caught. The chains around her wrists grew cold. Then the voice whispered again. "They buried the wrong creature tonight." Above ground, the final nail pierced the coffin lid. Kale turned away before the burial procession began. Yet the moment he reached the palace stairs, every wolf in the kingdom howled. Not toward the moon, toward the graveyard, beyond the frozen cliffs. And somewhere beneath the mountain below the palace, something answered. They buried Lyra Vale beyond the northern cliffs, where the old kings of Varelis had once thrown traitors to the wolves. No flowers were placed upon her grave. No mourning candle was lit. No bride song followed her into the earth. Only snow, silence, and the final echo of silver nails sealed around a girl the kingdom had decided was easier to fear than understand. The soldiers who carried her coffin did not speak as they lowered it into the frozen ground. One of them, a young wolf barely old enough to hold a spear, kept glancing toward the black line of pine trees beyond the graveyard. He had heard something moving there. Not a man, not a wolf. Something larger, slower, breathing with the patience of an ancient hunger. "Do not look into the trees," the priestess commanded. Her voice was calm, but her fingers tightened around the moonstone pendant at her throat. The dead are always watched. The soldier obeyed. He looked down instead. That was when he saw blood leaking from the coffin seams. Not red blood, black blood. Thick as melted shadow, steaming against the snow. "High priestess," he whispered. Celine turned sharply, but by the time her gaze fell upon the coffin, the stain had vanished. Only snow remained. Clean, white, innocent. The priestess stared for a long moment, then lifted her hand. "Cover it." Dirt struck the coffin lid. Again, 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 beneath the earth. Lyra heard every handful fall like distant thunder. She should have been dead by then. The silver chains around her throat should have burned through skin and bone. The old moon runes carved into the coffin should have crushed whatever remained of her cursed soul. But pain did not come the way she expected. Instead, cold wrapped around her like a second body, and in that cold, something unfolded inside her chest. Not a heartbeat, not yet. A memory. A forest of black trees beneath a blood-red moon. A woman screaming her name in a language Lyra had never learned but somehow understood. A wolf larger than a palace, kneeling before a throne made of bones. Then the voice returned, close enough to feel against the inside of her skull. Little bride, it whispered. Do you know why they feared your silence? Lyra could not answer. Her tongue lay heavy and useless behind her teeth, as it had since childhood. The voice seemed to smile, because the first curse was spoken through your blood. The silver chain around her wrist cracked. Lyra's eyes opened in the dark. Crimson light filled the coffin, not from outside, from her own veins. Far above, the final shovel of dirt sealed her grave. High Priestess Selene stood over it until the soldiers retreated. She waited until even their footsteps faded into the storm before she knelt and pressed her palm to the frozen earth. For the first time that night, fear entered her face. Stay buried, she whispered. For all our sakes, stay buried. But beneath her hand, deep below the grave, something laughed. At dawn, King Chael Draven stood alone in the highest chamber of the palace, watching snow erase the courtyard where his bride had been condemned. No servant dared enter. No counselor dared interrupt. Even his guards remained beyond the iron doors, pretending not to hear the growls that occasionally tore from the king's throat. Chael's hands gripped the edge of the stone balcony hard enough to crack it. The wind cut across his face. But he welcomed the sting. Pain was clean. Pain could be ruled. What had happened last night could not. He had felt Lyra's pulse when he touched her chin. Slow. Wrong. Almost dead. Yet carrying a strange warmth beneath the skin, like embers buried under ash. His wolf had recognized something in her. Not love. He refused that word. Not bond. That word belonged to the past, to a woman whose betrayal had left claw marks across his soul. But recognition. Yes. A violent, impossible recognition. His wolf had wanted to kneel. Chael shut his eyes. The monster inside him shifted. It was not the noble wolf of a king anymore. Not entirely. Since the breaking of his first mate bond, his wolf had changed into something darker, larger, more difficult to restrain. At night, its shape pressed beneath his skin, hungry for blood and ruin. The court believed their king was merely cruel. They did not know cruelty was the leash he used to keep the beast from devouring them all. A soft knock came at the door. Enter, Chael said. His voice carried no warmth. Commander Riven stepped inside, scarred armor dusted with snow, one hand resting near his sword. He had served Chael since the border wars and feared almost nothing. Yet even he stopped a careful distance away. The burial is done. Chael did not turn. And the priestess returned before dawn. She has called the council to the old moon chamber. Chael's eyes opened. Without my permission? She claims the matter concerns the survival of the kingdom. A low growl moved through Kyle's chest. The windows trembled. Riven lowered his gaze. There is more. Kyle turned then. Speak. Riven hesitated. 3 wolves were found dead near the North Road this morning. No wounds, no blood. Their shadows were gone. Silence fell between them. Chael's expression did not change, but the air in the chamber grew colder. Gone, as if burned away from the snow beneath them. Chael looked past him toward the mountains, toward the graveyard, toward the place where he had left a silent bride beneath silver nails. Send riders, he said. No one enters the northern woods without my seal. Riven bowed, but before he could leave, Chael spoke again. And Riven. The commander stopped. Find out everything the temple hid about Lyra Vale. Riven's eyes sharpened. You believe they lied? Chael looked back toward the White Kingdom below. I believe they were afraid. His hand flexed at his side, remembering the feel of her chin beneath his fingers, the faint tremor she had hidden from everyone but him. And fear always has a master. By the 3rd night after Lyra's execution, the kingdom began to rot in impossible ways. Milk soured before morning. Mirrors clouded black in noble chambers. Wolves refused to shift under moonlight, and instead pressed their bellies to the ground, whining toward the northern cliffs. In the royal kennels, newborn pups were found sleeping in perfect circles around empty shadows that moved when nobody cast them. The people whispered that the cursed bride had not died cleanly. The council whispered something worse. High Priestess Selene did not whisper at all. She moved through the old moon temple with controlled urgency, unlocking doors that had not been opened since Kyle's grandfather ruled. Deep below the temple floor, where roots pushed through stone and ancient prayers were carved into bone tablets, she entered the forbidden archive. One lamp burned blue in her hand. Its light revealed murals hidden beneath centuries of dust. A black wolf with a crown of antlers, a woman with crimson eyes, a palace split open from beneath, and kings kneeling in blood. Selene stopped before the final mural. It showed a coffin, empty. Behind it stood a bride. And behind her, beneath the mountain, something enormous opened one golden eye. The priestess inhaled slowly. "No," she whispered. "Not yet." From the darkness behind her, an old voice answered, "You killed the seal." Selene turned. Elder Marath sat in the shadows, his blind eyes milky beneath the hood of a retired moon priest. He had not left the lower temple in 20 years. Most believed him dead. Selene wished he had been. "The girl was the danger," she said. Marath smiled without kindness. The girl was the door. Selene's face tightened. Her bloodline carried the hollow wolf. Her bloodline chained it. His dead eyes seemed to stare through her. "There is a difference." For the first time, Selene's composure cracked. "You think I do not know what sleeps beneath the palace? You think I have not heard it breathing through the stones since winter began?" The court was turning against the temple. The rival alphas smelled weakness. If the king learned that girl was tied to the old seal, he would have protected her. He would have bound himself to her. And then what? A cursed king with a monstrous wolf and a bride carrying death in her veins. Marath leaned forward. "Perhaps that was the only thing that could save us." Selene's jaw hardened. "Or the thing that would end us." Above them, somewhere in the palace mountain, a deep crack split through stone. Dust fell from the ceiling. The blue flame in Selene's lamp bent sideways, as if bowing to something unseen. Marath closed his eyes. "It has hurt her now." Selene turned toward the stairs. "Then we make certain the king never brings her back." The old priest laughed softly. "Child, the dead do not need permission to return." On the 7th night, Lyra clawed her way out of her own grave. Not with hands. Her hands had gone numb long before. Not with strength. Her body had been too weak from silver and cold. She rose because the earth above her opened like a wound. Roots curled away from the coffin. Stones split. The black wood cracked down the center, and the silver nails melted into dark liquid that sank into the soil. Snow fell into the coffin, touching her face with a gentleness the living had never given her. Lyra inhaled. The breath hurt. It dragged across her ribs like broken glass. She sat up slowly. The world above was white and silent. The graveyard stretched around her beneath a moon hidden by storm clouds. No torches, no soldiers, no voices. Only black wolves standing between the tombstones. Hundreds of them. Their eyes glowed crimson in the dark. They did not snarl. They bowed. Lyra stared at them, chest rising and falling in shallow, painful breaths. She should have been terrified. Instead, grief rose first. A strange grief, old as the forest, heavy as memory. These wolves were not alive. Snow passed through some of their bodies. Others had bones showing beneath shadow fur. Spirits. Dead wolves. Forgotten wolves. Betrayed wolves. And every one of them watched her as if they had waited centuries for her to open her eyes. The largest stepped forward. It had no right eye, and a broken silver spear still jutted from its chest. Its voice entered her mind, rough and ancient. "Bride of the hollow blood, the mountain has begun to wake." Lyra touched her throat. No sound came out. The wolf lowered its massive head. "We know, Silent One. Your voice was taken because your blood could command what kings buried." Lyra's fingers trembled. "Taken?" The wolf's gaze darkened. "The temple sealed your voice when you were a child. They feared what would answer if you ever called." Her memories shifted violently. A monastery chamber, Priestess hands, moonwater forced between her lips. A child's scream dying before it could leave her mouth. Lyra bent forward, one hand gripping the edge of the broken coffin. Rage did not come quickly. It came like winter quiet, spreading, impossible to stop. The spirit wolf stepped closer. You must return to the palace. She shook her head once. The palace meant chains. Judgment. Kale's cold silver eyes. The coffin lid closing above her. The wolf's voice softened. If you do not, the thing beneath it will rise. And this time, it will not feed only on betrayal. It will feed on every living wolf in Varelis. Lyra lifted her face toward the distant palace, its black towers barely visible through the storm. Her body shook with cold. Her wedding gown hung torn and burial-stained from her shoulders. She had no army, no voice, no place among the living. But behind her, the dead wolves waited, not commanding, not pitying, recognizing. Lyra slowly climbed from the grave. The moment her bare feet touched the snow, every spirit wolf lowered its head again. The storm stopped. And far away inside the palace, King Kale Draven woke with blood on his hands and her name caught in his throat. Kale had not spoken her name aloud when he woke, yet the sound of it still haunted the chamber like a forbidden prayer. Lyra. The syllables lingered in the cold air, while dawn struggled weakly beyond the frost-covered windows. Kale sat at the edge of the bed, chest rising unevenly beneath half-open black robes, stained with blood. Not another man's blood. His own. Deep claw marks, carved across his arms where his wolf had torn through skin during the night. Again, the beast was worsening. For years he had controlled it through violence, discipline, and distance. Since the breaking of his first mate bond, the creature inside him no longer resembled the noble royal wolves of Varelis. It had become something older, hungrier. Sometimes he feared it no longer recognized him at all. But last night had been different. Last night he dreamed of a coffin, opening beneath falling snow, and crimson eyes staring directly into his. A violent knock struck the chamber doors. Your Majesty, Commander Riven. Kale rose immediately. Enter. The commander stepped inside, pale beneath the scar crossing his jaw. Snow clung to his boots. He looked like a man who had ridden through death to deliver terrible news. Kale already knew. He felt it in his bones. The graveyard, Riven said carefully. You need to see it. The ride north took less than an hour. No one spoke. Not Kale, not Riven, not the royal guard surrounding them beneath dark banners snapping violently in the winter wind. The farther north they traveled, the stranger the world became. Trees bled black sap. Frozen rivers steamed beneath the ice. And wolves. Wolves watched silently from the forest. Not ordinary wolves. These creatures stood too still. Their eyes glowed faintly red beneath the storm-dark sky. Some appeared translucent when snow passed through their bodies. Even the royal horses trembled. When they reached the cliffside graveyard, the guard stopped breathing entirely. The grave was open. Not dug open from above. Broken outward from beneath. The coffin lay shattered across the snow like the remains of a prison no longer strong enough to hold its prisoner. Melted silver stained the earth black around it. Kale dismounted slowly. Every instinct inside him sharpened at once. His wolf surged forward violently, not in rage. In recognition, the scent remained everywhere. Winter ash, ancient forests, blood beneath moonlight. Here, Riven knelt beside the grave and lifted something carefully from the snow. A broken silver chain. The chain once locked around Lyra's wrists. It had not snapped. It had melted. That is impossible, one guard whispered. Kale ignored him. His eyes moved instead toward footprints leading away from the graveyard. Bare footprints. Small. Delicate. Alive. The tracks disappeared into the northern forest. One of the older soldiers suddenly crossed himself with trembling fingers. The dead bride walks. Silence. Riven snapped. But fear had already spread through the men. Kael crouched beside the broken grave, touching the dark earth with one gloved hand. Cold rushed through him instantly. Not natural cold. Memory. A woman screaming beneath moonlight. Black wolves surrounding a throne. Silver nails hammered into wood. Then a voice whispered inside his skull. "You buried your queen alive." Kael jerked backward violently. The guards stared. The king, rarely startled. Never from fear. His jaw tightened. "No one speaks of this outside the palace. But your majesty, no one." The force in his voice silenced the wind itself. Kael rose slowly. Eyes fixed upon the forest beyond the cliffs. Somewhere inside those endless black trees, the girl they buried had opened her eyes again. And the terrifying part was that a piece of him felt relieved. Behind him, one guard suddenly screamed. Everyone spun. The young soldier pointed toward the tree line with a shaking hand. A woman stood between the pines. White burial gown, dark hair, moving in the wind. Crimson eyes glowing faintly beneath the falling snow. Lyra. Several guards immediately reached for weapons. But Kael froze. She looked exactly as she had the night of her execution, and completely different. Not weaker, not broken, changed. The snow no longer touched her skin. It curved around her like frightened spirits avoiding a queen. For one endless moment, her gaze met Kael's. Pain crossed her face first. Then something colder. Not hatred. Recognition. And behind her, dozens of massive black wolves emerged soundlessly from the trees. Dead wolves. Spirit wolves. An entire ghostly pack surrounding the silent bride. The guards stumbled backward in horror. "Moon, save us." One wolf stepped beside Lyra, enormous enough to tower over a warhorse. A broken spear remained lodged through its phantom ribs. The beast stared directly at Kael. Then slowly, deliberately, it lowered its head to Lyra. The other wolves followed instantly. An army kneeling. Not to a king. To her. The world seemed to stop breathing. Even Kael's wolf fell silent inside him, because ancient instinct recognized what his mind refused to understand. Royal blood. Not ordinary royal blood. Something far older than the throne of Varelis itself. Lyra looked at Kael one final time. Then she vanished into the forest. The spirit wolves disappeared with her, and only silence remained behind. One of the guards collapsed to his knees. "She's the Hollow Queen." Kael turned sharply. "Who told you that name?" The guard paled instantly. "My grandmother used to speak of old stories, about a queen buried beneath the mountain wars centuries ago. A woman whose wolves kept death itself chained beneath the kingdom." Riven's face darkened. "Those stories were forbidden." "Yes," Kael said quietly. His silver eyes remained fixed upon the empty forest, which means someone wanted them forgotten. By nightfall, panic had already begun spreading through the capital. The dead bride had been seen walking through northern villages. Wolves followed her without command. Children claimed she healed frostbite, merely by touching skin. Others swore crops blackened where she stepped. No two stories matched. But every version ended the same way. The coffin had returned empty. Inside the palace, High Priestess Selene stood before the royal council, while noble lords shouted over one another beneath torchlight. She must be destroyed immediately. The northern packs are already whispering rebellion. If the people believe the Hollow Queen lives, she is not a queen, Selene snapped. Silence followed. The priestess rarely lost composure, but fear sharpened every word tonight. She is a vessel, nothing more. If the Hollow Wolf fully awakens inside her, every soul in Varelis dies. An older councilman leaned forward. "Then why did the execution fail?" Selene said nothing, because she knew the answer now. The silver coffin had not imprisoned Lyra. It had fed her blood directly into the old seal beneath the mountain. The execution had awakened the very power Selene feared. The chamber doors suddenly opened. Kael entered, without announcement. The room immediately fell silent. He removed his gloves slowly as he approached the council table, revealing fresh claw wounds across his hands. Several nobles noticed. None dared mention them. Selene held his gaze carefully. Your Majesty, you lied to me. The room tightened instantly. The priestess remained calm. About what? Lyra Vale. Her expression did not shift. Kale stopped before her. You told this court she carried the hollow wolf inside her soul. She does. You neglected to mention her bloodline also kept it chained. For the first time, genuine surprise crossed Celine's face. Someone had told him. Dangerous. Very dangerous. She deceived you, Celine replied smoothly. The dead are skilled manipulators. She was alive when you buried her. The accusation struck the room like a blade. Several council members looked horrified. Celine's voice cooled. Would you rather I had allowed the kingdom to burn? Kale leaned closer. You feared her. The priestess met his gaze evenly. No, I feared what you would become if you touched her long enough to remember. A strange silence followed. Kale's eyes darkened. Explain. Celine immediately realized her mistake. Though late. There are old prophecies, she said carefully. Ancient bonds between certain bloodlines and the creatures beneath the mountain. And mine. You descend from the kings who sealed the hollow wolf away. Kale's jaw tightened. Celine continued slowly. But your bloodline was never strong enough to maintain the seal alone. The old kings required another line beside them. Understanding moved through the chamber like poison. The council began whispering. Kyle stared at Celine with growing fury. The Vale bloodline. The priestess said nothing. Because silence had become confirmation. Kale suddenly understood why Lyra had been brought from the monastery. Why the council forced the marriage. Why Celine insisted on immediate execution afterward. They never intended the union to survive. They only needed the ancient marriage ritual completed long enough to strengthen the weakening seal beneath the mountain. And once it was done, Lyra became expendable. Something violent moved behind Kale's eyes. Riven subtly stepped closer, sensing danger. Celine straightened. Your Majesty, sentiment changes nothing. The girl is no longer entirely human. If she fully awakens, the hollow wolf will rise with her. A deep growl entered the chamber. Not from outside, from Kale himself. The torches flickered violently. Several nobles recoiled in fear. Celine watched him carefully now. The curse inside him was worsening faster than expected. Good. A weakened king was easier to control. You will issue a royal hunt, she said softly. Find the girl before the northern packs rally around her. Kale's breathing slowed. Controlled. Dangerously controlled. Then he asked the question quietly enough to terrify everyone listening. And if I refuse? The room froze. Selene held his gaze. Then the throne will refuse you first. Silence. Heavy. Deadly. Because everyone in the chamber understood the truth hidden beneath her words. The kingdom already feared their king. If rumors spread that Kale protected the dead bride, the royal bloodline itself could fracture. Civil war would follow. Kale looked around the chamber slowly, at the frightened nobles, at the priestess who manipulated kingdoms through fear, at the council that buried an innocent woman alive for political survival. Then his eyes lifted toward the storm raging beyond the palace windows, toward the northern forest, toward Lyra, his dead bride. The woman his wolf refused to forget. And somewhere far beneath the palace mountain, something ancient shifted in its chains. Waiting. The northern forest did not belong to the living after sunset. Even hunters avoided it, once darkness touched the trees. The snow there never melted properly. Sound carried strangely between the pines. Sometimes travelers heard footsteps following them for miles without ever finding tracks behind them. And now the dead wolves walked there openly. Lyra moved through the black forest beneath a sky heavy with storm clouds, her bare feet leaving no prints upon the snow anymore. The cold no longer pierced her skin the way it once had. It drifted around her instead, curling through the torn edges of her burial gown like something familiar. The spirit wolves surrounded her in silence, not guarding, following, watching her, with ancient patience. At first, the sight unsettled her. Every pair of glowing crimson eyes reminded her she no longer belonged among ordinary people. But exhaustion eventually dulled fear into numbness. She had spent her entire life being stared at like a curse. The dead simply did it more honestly than the living ever had. The largest wolf, the one with the broken spear through its chest, walked beside her through the snow-covered trees. Its name, she had learned, was Varelis. Once, centuries ago, Varelis had belonged to the first Hollow Queen. Now, he belonged to death itself. The spirit wolf glanced toward her quietly. "Your strength returns faster than expected." Lyra lowered her eyes. She still did not fully understand what she had become. The grave should have killed her. The silver chain should have destroyed every trace of forbidden blood inside her veins. Instead, she felt awake. Not powerful, not yet, but awake in places that had slept all her life. Sometimes she heard whispers beneath the earth. Sometimes shadows bent toward her before torchlight reached them. And sometimes, most frightening of all, she felt another heartbeat, moving faintly beside her own. Ancien, hungry, patient. The hollow wolf. Lyra pressed trembling fingers against her chest. Varelis' voice softened. "It cannot consume you unless you surrender to it." She looked toward him sharply. The wolf's crimson eyes reflected moonlight through the trees. "The hollow wolf was never meant to exist without a queen. That is why your bloodline was created." Created. The word chilled her more deeply than winter. Before she could ask more, another scent entered the wind. Smoke. Blood. Fear. The spirit wolves instantly stopped moving. Growls rolled through the forest. Varelis lifted his head sharply toward the east. Hunters. Lyra's pulse quickened. Not royal soldiers. These scents were rougher. Pack wolves. Northern rebels. The spirit wolves shifted protectively around her, as distant voices echoed between the trees. "Drax, stop here. She cannot vanish." The priestess promised triple silver for proof of the corpse. Lyra's stomach tightened. Corpse. Even now, that was all she remained to the kingdom. Varelis stepped closer. Hide. But it was already too late. Torchlight burst through the forest. 5 armed wolves emerged between the trees wearing the crimson furs of the eastern rebel packs. Scarred men hardened by winter war and hunger. The leader saw Lyra first. His expression turned white beneath his beard. "She's real." One younger hunter immediately raised a silver spear. "Kill her before she..." Every spirit wolf snarled at once. The sound shook snow from the branches overhead. The hunters staggered backward in terror as crimson-eyed wolves emerged from the darkness surrounding Lyra. Not alive. Not dead. Something in between. One hunter dropped his torch entirely. "Moon above." The leader swallowed hard, gripping his weapon tighter. "You are cursed." Lyra stood frozen among the wolves. The old instinct to lower her head returned immediately. To apologize. To shrink smaller. To survive. But then she remembered the coffin. The nails. The silence forced upon her since childhood. And slowly, very slowly, she lifted her gaze. The forest responded instantly. Wind exploded through the trees. The shadows beneath the hunters twisted violently across the snow. One man screamed as darkness wrapped around his legs like claws. The spirit wolves advanced. Not attacking. Waiting for her command. Fear spread across the hunters' faces. Not fear of death. Fear of obedience. Because something inside them recognized her blood before their minds could deny it. The leader suddenly dropped to one knee. The others stared at him in shock. "You fool. Be quiet," he whispered harshly. His eyes never left Lyra. "My grandmother told stories about wolves like these." The man lowered his head fully. The dead only kneel for one bloodline. Silence fell through the forest. Even the wind seemed to pause. The younger hunters slowly backed away, horrified. "You think she's the Hollow Queen?" "No," the leader whispered. His voice trembled. "I think she's worse." Lyra's chest tightened painfully. She did not want this fear. She did not want kneeling wolves or whispers of monsters and queens. She wanted. The thought stopped abruptly. Home? No. That place had buried her alive. Valer's voice entered her mind quietly. "They will keep hunting you now." The rebel leader rose carefully. The priestess has spread word across every northern territory. She claims you are awakening the beast beneath the mountain. Lyra looked toward him sharply. The man hesitated. Then, cautiously. But some of us remember older stories. He reached slowly into his cloak and withdrew a small carved pendant. A black wolf beneath a crescent moon. Vaelor growled softly beside her. The hunter noticed. This symbol belonged to the first queens of Varelis before the temple outlawed it. His eyes darkened. They erased your bloodline from history. Lyra's fingers tightened at her sides. She remembered fragments now. A monastery hidden in snow. Temple women whispering when they thought she slept. Don't let her speak. Never let her call to it. The leader looked toward the spirit wolves surrounding her. You should leave these forests. Lyra frowned slightly. The royal hunt has already begun. At those words, the entire forest seemed to tighten. Vaelor's fur bristled. Far away. Very far away. A wolf howled. Not a spirit wolf. Alive. Royal. The hunters heard it too. The king. One whispered fearfully. Vaelor turned toward the western mountains immediately. He comes himself. Lyra's heartbeat stumbled. Kael. Something dangerous moved beneath her ribs at the thought of him. Not trust. Never trust. But connection. A violent thread she could not cut. She still remembered the expression on his face before the coffin closed. Pain. Real pain. As though burying her had wounded him too. The rebel leader stepped backward cautiously. If the Alpha King finds you before the temple does, perhaps you still have a chance. One younger hunter looked horrified. You think the king will spare her? The older wolf stared toward the dark horizon. I think the king has begun to fear the wrong people. Then the hunters vanished back into the forest. Lyra remained motionless long after they disappeared. Vaelor's crimson eyes narrowed toward the west. We must move. But Lyra did not follow immediately, because another memory had surfaced. Not from the hollow wolf, from herself. A child hiding behind monastery walls, while priestesses argued nearby. The king's line can never know she survived. The seal weakens every generation. If the Draven heir ever bonds with her bloodline again, then the beast beneath the mountain will wake. Lyra pressed a hand against her chest sharply. Bond, not marriage. Something older. Something carved into blood itself. Vaelor watched her carefully. You remember now. Her breathing became uneven. The spirit wolf stepped closer. The kings of Varelis were never meant to rule alone. The first Hollow Queen bound her bloodline to theirs after the Great Devouring War. Together they sealed the creature beneath the mountain. Lyra's eyes lifted slowly. Then why bury me? Pain crossed Vaelor's ancient face. Because fear always kills its protectors first. Before Lyra could think further, every spirit wolf suddenly turned toward the western ridge. Growling. Snow exploded from the trees above. A massive black wolf landed in the clearing. Alive. Enormous. Silver eyes glowing in the dark. Royal markings burned faintly across its fur. Kael, or rather, what remained of the king when the monster inside him took control. The rebel hunters had fled too late. Blood stained the beast's jaws already. The royal wolf stared at Lyra across the clearing, breathing hard, wild, dangerously unstable, not entirely sane. The spirit wolf surrounded Lyra instantly. Vaelor stepped forward with bared teeth, but Kael's wolf ignored every threat around him. His gaze locked only onto her. Lyra's breath caught, because beneath all the violence in those silver eyes, she saw agony. The beast took one step toward her. Then, another. Not hunting. Searching. Like a creature starving for something it could no longer survive without. Vaelor snarled inside her mind. Do not touch him. But Kael's wolf stopped suddenly, lowering his massive head slightly toward Lyra. Submission. The spirit wolves froze in shock. Even Vaelor, been still. Ancient silence filled the clearing. Because royal wolves did not bow. Not to anyone. Yet the monstrous beast before her slowly bent one knee into the snow, and somewhere deep beneath the palace mountain, ancient chains began to crack. The forest forgot how to breathe. Snow drifted soundlessly between the trees, while every spirit wolf stared at the kneeling royal beast in stunned silence. Even Varelis remained motionless, crimson eyes narrowed with something dangerously close to disbelief. Kyle's wolf kept its head lowered before Lyra, not in weakness, in instinct. Ancient instinct, older than the throne itself. The sight should have terrified her. Instead, something inside her chest answered. A strange pull, warm despite the winter air. The hollow wolf stirred beneath her ribs immediately, pressing against her soul like a creature recognizing another predator. Mine, the ancient voice whispered. Lyra flinched. The kneeling beast lifted its head instantly at her movement. Silver eyes locked onto hers, and for one impossible moment, the monster inside the king looked afraid, not of her power, of himself. Varelis stepped protectively between them. He loses control. The beast's lips peeled back from its fangs in warning. The spirit wolves surrounding Lyra snarled immediately in response. The clearing erupted into tension so sharp it seemed the snow itself might split apart beneath it. Lyra's pulse hammered painfully. Kyle's wolf was larger than any living wolf she had ever seen, nearly the size of a warhorse. Black fur bristled along his shoulders like shadow-given flesh. Old scars cut across his body, some silvered with age, others fresh and still bleeding. One mark stood out above the rest, a jagged wound crossing directly over his heart. Not clawed, bond-burned. Varelis noticed her staring. His first mate betrayed him. Pain flickered through the beast's silver eyes at the words. Lyra remembered the rumors whispered among monastery servants years ago. The king once had a Luna. No one spoke of what happened to her, only that afterward, Kale Draven became feared even by his own court. The beast suddenly staggered. A violent tremor rippled through his body. Then another. His breathing turned ragged. Valer's voice sharpened. Move back. Too late. Kale's wolf let out a horrific roar as black veins erupted beneath his fur like spreading poison. Snow exploded outward from the force of his power. Trees groaned around the clearing. The spirit wolves instantly lunged protectively around Lyra, but she could not look away, because the beast was suffering, not attacking. Suffering. His body twisted violently, as if something inside him fought to tear free. The hollow wolf inside Lyra stirred harder. Broken, it whispered. The beast collapsed to one knee again. Then another. A low, tortured sound escaped him, and suddenly, Lyra understood. Kale had not come hunting her. He had lost control of his transformation. The royal hunt, the growing curse, the claw, wounds across his hands. The council's fear. His wolf was dying. No, worse, changing. Varelis growled deeply. The broken mate bond poisoned him. If the corruption reaches his heart fully, he will become feral. Lyra looked sharply toward the spirit wolf. Feral royal wolves did not simply die. They destroyed kingdoms first. Kale's beast lifted his head again slowly toward her. There was no king left in his eyes now. Only agony. And beneath it, recognition. As if some ancient part of him knew she alone could stop what was happening. The spirit wolves shifted uneasily around her. Do not go near him, Varelis warned. His control is nearly gone. But Lyra's gaze remained fixed upon the trembling creature in the snow. Everyone feared him. Everyone feared her. Perhaps monsters recognized each other. Kale suddenly snarled violently and slammed his claws into the frozen ground. Black energy burst outward in jagged waves, killing every patch of grass beneath the snow instantly. The corruption was spreading fast. One more transformation like this, and the king might never return to human form again. The hollow wolf's voice slithered through Lyra's mind softly. Touch him. Varelis turned sharply toward her. No, but Lyra stepped forward anyway. The spirit wolf stirred anxiously. Kale's beast froze. Silver eyes widened slightly as she approached. He could tear her apart in one movement. They both knew it. Still, she kept walking. One slow step after another through the snow, until only a few feet separated them. The beast's breathing became uneven, not aggressive, unsteady, almost fearful. Lyra slowly lifted her hand. The moment her fingers touched black fur, everything exploded. A violent pulse of ancient magic tore through the clearing. Snow blasted from the trees in silver waves. The spirit wolves recoiled instantly. Kyle roared, not in pain, in shock. Images slammed into Lyra's mind all at once. A younger Kale, standing before a burning battlefield. A beautiful, silver-haired woman pressing another man's blood-stained hand against her lips. Betrayal. The snap of a mate bond tearing apart. Kale screaming as his wolf transformed into something monstrous beneath the red moon. Then, another memory. A child, hidden behind monastery walls. Dark hair, silent eyes, watching royal soldiers ride past in the snow. Kyle. He had seen her before. Years ago. Long before the wedding. Long before the coffin. Lyra gasped sharply as the visions vanished. Kale's wolf stared at her in horror. Not because she touched him. Because she had seen inside him. The beast stumbled backward several steps. The corruption beneath his fur retreated slightly where her handprint remained. Valer's eyes widened. Impossible. Lyra looked down at her trembling fingers. Black veins crawled briefly beneath her skin before fading again. The hollow wolf purred deep inside her chest. He remembers now. Kale suddenly shifted. The transformation was brutal. Bones cracked violently through the clearing. Black fur receded. Flesh twisted. The king collapsed into the snow in human form, breathing hard enough to fog the freezing air. Half naked beneath torn black fabric. Kale braced himself against the ground with shaking arms. Blood dripped from his mouth, but his silver eyes remained fixed on Lyra. The spirit wolves growled uneasily. Valor stepped beside her immediately. He is dangerous like this. Kale laughed once. Low. Broken. Wise spirit. His voice sounded rough from the transformation. Lyra remained frozen where she stood. Seeing the king in human form again unsettled her more deeply than the beast had. Because now she could see the exhaustion carved into him. The loneliness. The scars no royal robes could hide. Kale slowly rose to his feet despite the blood staining the snow beneath him. You should have stayed dead, he said quietly. The words should have sounded cruel. Instead, they sounded desperate. Lyra's expression tightened faintly. Kyle noticed immediately. Regret flickered across his face before vanishing beneath control. I did not mean. He stopped. Kings did not apologize. Not even broken ones. Silence stretched between them. Then Kale's eyes moved slowly toward the spirit wolves surrounding her. So the old stories were true. Valor bared his teeth. The old stories buried your kingdom alive. Kale's gaze sharpened instantly. You can speak? Only to those tied to the hollow blood. The king looked back toward Lyra. Something dangerous unfolded behind his eyes. Not fear. Understanding. The temple lied about you. Lyra held his gaze silently. Kale stepped closer despite Valor's warning growl. The marriage ritual, he said slowly. That was not the first binding between our bloodlines, was it? Valor answered before Lyra could. No. Your ancestors and hers sealed the devouring beneath the mountain together centuries ago. King and queen, fang and shadow, life and death. Kale's jaw tightened. The hollow wolf. The spirit wolf's gaze darkened. Not wolf. The words chilled the clearing instantly. Valor turned toward the distant mountains where the black palace of Varelis rose beyond the forest. Long ago, something came from beneath the world during the age before kingdoms. It wore many shapes, consumed entire bloodlines. The first hollow queen chained it beneath the mountain using her own soul. Kale's eyes narrowed. And Lyra? The spirit wolf looked at her softly. She inherited the prison. Silence. Heavy. Terrible. Kale stared at Lyra, as if seeing her for the first time. Not a cursed bride. Not a political sacrifice. A living seal. And suddenly he understood the true horror of what the council had done. They had buried the kingdom's protection alive. A distant howl shattered the moment. Not spirit wolves. Royal hunters. Close. Very close. Kale's expression darkened instantly. They tracked me. Varelis snarled. The priestess moves faster than expected. The king turned toward Lyra sharply. You need to leave. She did not move. Another howl echoed nearer. Kale stepped toward her urgently now. If Selene's hunters find you with me, the council will declare treason against the throne itself. The hollow wolf whispered inside Lyra again. Ask him why he came. Her eyes lifted slowly toward Kale. The king froze slightly beneath her gaze, because despite her silence, he understood the question. Why? Why come alone? Why kneel? Why search for the dead bride everyone else wanted destroyed? Kale looked away first. Snow moved through dark strands of his hair while distant wolves closed in around the forest. Finally, he said quietly, because when they buried you, his voice roughened. My wolf tried to follow you into the grave. Lyra's breath caught. The confession felt far more dangerous than a love declaration ever could, because Kale sounded horrified by it. The hunting horns suddenly echoed through the trees. Too close now. Varelis' spirit wolf snarled instantly. Kyle looked toward the sound with murder in his eyes. Then back at Lyra. Run north, he ordered. There's an abandoned fortress beyond the frozen lake. The temple cannot track you there. Lyra hesitated. Kale stepped closer one final time, and very carefully, as though touching something sacred or deadly. He brushed his fingers against her wrist, where the silver chains had once burned her skin. The corruption inside him instantly quieted. Both of them froze. The connection hit harder this time. Not desire. Recognition. Ancien. Violent. Incomplete. Kale's silver eyes darkened. The gods help us, he whispered. Then the first royal hunters burst through the trees. The forest exploded into violence. Royal hunters poured through the trees beneath crimson banners. Silver-tipped spears raised toward the clearing. Their wolves snarled at the spirit pack surrounding Lyra. But the moment those beasts caught the scent of death magic, several recoiled instantly with frightened whines. The hunters did not. Fear had already hardened into obedience. By order of the Moon Temple, one captain shouted. The cursed bride is to be seized alive. Kale stepped forward, before anyone could move closer. The shift in the clearing was immediate. Every royal wolf lowered itself instinctively. Even armed soldiers stumbled backward beneath the force of the king's fury. Snow spiraled violently around him, as black veins briefly darkened beneath the skin of his throat. The corruption inside him had not settled completely. It paced beneath his flesh now like a chained monster, listening for an excuse to slaughter. The captain swallowed hard, but forced himself to continue. Your Majesty. The priestess ordered. I know exactly what she ordered. Kale's voice cut through the forest like a blade. His silver eyes moved toward the soldiers behind the captain. And yet I do not remember granting the temple command over my wolves. Silence. Dangerous silence. The hunters looked at one another uncertainly. No one wanted to be the first to challenge the king directly. Not here. Not while his scent carried traces of transformation and blood. But then another figure emerged from the trees. Black ceremonial robes swept across the snow. Moonstone chains glimmered against pale skin. High Priestess Selene. The spirit wolves snarled instantly. Valer's lips peeled back from phantom fangs. She comes herself now. Selene ignored the dead wolves entirely. Her eyes locked first onto Lyra standing among them in the torn burial gown. For the briefest moment, fear crossed the priestess's face. Not because Lyra stood alive before her. Because the spirit wolves knelt around her openly now. The hollow bloodline was awakening faster than Selene anticipated. Dangerously fast. Then the priestess's gaze shifted toward Kyle, and sharpened immediately. The king stood too close to the girl. Far too close. You should not be here alone, Selene said calmly. Kyle's expression remained carved from ice. Neither should you. Her pale eyes flicked briefly toward the fresh blood staining his hands. The corruption was worsening. Good. A dying king was easier to control than a bonded one. The council grows concerned, Selene said carefully. Rumors spread through the capital already. Villages claim the dead kneel for her. Kael glanced once toward Lyra before answering coldly. Then perhaps the villages see more clearly than the temple. A ripple of tension spread through the hunters. Selene noticed immediately. Dangerous. The northern wolves already distrusted the temple after years of famine and political manipulation. If the king publicly defended Lyra now, the kingdom could fracture overnight. Selene stepped forward slowly. "Your Majesty," she said softly. "Look at her carefully." Lyra met the priestess's gaze without lowering her head this time. Selene felt the difference instantly. The silent monastery girl was gone. Something ancient watched through those crimson eyes now. "Do you truly believe that creature is still human?" the priestess asked. Kael did not answer immediately, because he had touched her, felt warmth inside death itself, seen grief in her expression when she thought no one watched. No monster carried pain like that. Selene's voice hardened slightly. "The hollow wolf feeds on betrayal. Every moment she lives, the creature beneath the mountain grows stronger." At those words, Lyra flinched faintly. Kael noticed, and suddenly understood something important. She feared it too. The realization hit him harder than expected. All this time the kingdom treated her as if she desired destruction. But Lyra looked less like a queen of monsters, and more like a woman terrified of becoming one. The spirit wolves shifted protectively around her. Selene saw the movement, and made her decision instantly. She raised one hand. The hunters lifted silver spears together. "Seize her." Kael moved before anyone else. His wolf exploded outward through the clearing. Not fully transformed. Not fully human. Something between. Black claws erupted from his hands. Silver eyes burned violently beneath the storm-dark sky. The force of his power slammed into the hunters hard enough to knock several into the snow. "No one touch her." The words came out half growl, half command. Ancient alpha power rolled through the forest. The royal wolves immediately lowered themselves to the ground. Even the spirit wolves fell silent, because Kael Draven had just publicly chosen a side. Selene's expression finally cracked. "You would threaten your own kingdom for her?" Kael's monstrous gaze locked onto the priestess. "You buried an innocent woman alive. She was necessary." The words escaped sharper than intended. The forest stilled. Kael stepped forward slowly. "What does that mean?" Selene realized too late that anger had betrayed her composure. But the damage was done. The hunters watched carefully now. Riven's earlier investigations had already seeded doubt among the royal guard. Questions spread through the capital about the execution, about the old bloodlines, about why the temple feared a silent girl more than rival armies. Selene could not allow those doubts to survive. "She carries the Hollow Queen's soul," the priestess snapped. "If the seal breaks completely, the devouring beneath the mountain will awaken." Kael's expression darkened further. "Then why did your temple cut out her voice as a child?" Silence slammed through the clearing. "Lyra froze." The hunters looked horrified. Selene's eyes widened slightly. Kael knew. "How?" she whispered. The king's fury turned lethal. "You mutilated a child because you feared her bloodline." The spirit wolves began growling deeply now, the sound moving through the forest like distant thunder. Selene lifted her chin stubbornly. "We protected the kingdom." "No," Kael said quietly. "You protected your power." The accusation struck harder than any blade, because too many wolves already suspected it was true. Selene saw belief shifting in the hunters' faces. Dangerous. Unacceptable. So she did the only thing left. She turned toward Lyra directly and spoke the forbidden words. "Ask her what happened to her mother." Lyra's body went rigid, instantly. Kael frowned sharply. Selene stepped closer, moonstone chains glowing faintly beneath her robes. "Go on, child. Tell them what your bloodline does to the people it loves." The hollow wolf stirred violently inside Lyra's chest. Memories crashed through her mind. Blood on monastery floors. Her mother screaming. Shadow creatures tearing through walls. A little girl hiding beneath a bed, while wolves died outside. No, not wolves. Dead wolves. The same crimson-eyed spirits surrounding her now. Lyra staggered backward. Vaylor moved instantly beside her. Do not listen. But the memories kept coming. Her mother kneeling before temple soldiers, crying, begging. Please, she whispered. I cannot hear it anymore. Then blackness swallowing the monastery. In a single night. Lyra pressed trembling hands against her head. The spirit wolves became restless. The air darkened around the clearing. Selene saw it immediately and smiled faintly. There, the priestess whispered to the hunters. Do you finally see what she is? The snow beneath Lyra's feet began turning black. Shadows spread outward in thin cracks. The hunters panicked instantly. She's transforming. Silver chains. Hold her down. Kael moved toward Lyra immediately, but Vaylor blocked him with a violent snarl. Not yet. Lyra's breathing became ragged. The hollow wolf's voice filled her skull completely now. They killed her because she tried to resist me. No. Lyra shook violently. Not true. Your mother begged the temple to kill her before the devouring reached you too. The shadow beneath the snow spread wider. Trees groaned around the clearing. Several hunters backed away in terror. Kael ignored them completely. His eyes remained fixed only on Lyra. And for the first time since meeting her, he truly understood her loneliness. Not because she was feared, because she feared herself more than anyone else ever could. Lyra. Her name left his mouth softly. The sound cut through the chaos. Lyra looked toward him instinctively. Kael stepped closer despite the dark energy cracking through the snow between them. Selene shouted immediately. Do not touch her. Kael ignored her. Look at me. Lyra's crimson eyes locked onto his. Pain moved through her expression like a living wound. The hollow wolf raged inside her now, feeding on fear, memory, betrayal. Kael recognized the feeling, because his own beast had done the same for years. You are not it, he said quietly. The words shook something inside her. Selene's face darkened. You fool. Kael turned toward the priestess with murder in his eyes. You taught her to fear herself before she could even speak. The spirit wolves fell silent again. Even the storm seemed to pause. Kael looked back toward Lyra slowly, and now you wonder why monsters answer her grief. The corruption inside him surged suddenly. Black veins spread across his throat. The beast beneath his skin clawed violently to emerge. Too much emotion. Too much rage. Kael staggered sharply. Riven, who had just arrived with reinforcements at the edge of the clearing, swore under his breath. The king was losing control again. Selena saw it too, and immediately seized the opportunity. Kill the girl now, she screamed. The hunters raised silver weapons. But before anyone could move, Lyra finally screamed. Not with sound, with power. The forest exploded into crimson moonfire. Every spirit wolf howled together. Silver weapons shattered instantly. Shadow burst from beneath the earth in violent waves as ancient runes ignited across Lyra's skin. And for the first time, in 11 years, the kingdom heard the voice the temple tried to bury. Enough. The word shattered the forest. Not loudly. Not like thunder. Worse. It carried through the trees with the weight of ancient authority, as if the world itself remembered obeying that voice long before kingdoms existed. Every wolf in the clearing dropped instantly. Royal wolves. Spirit wolves. Even the hunting beasts collapsed into the snow with terrified whines. The hunters stared in horror, because Lyra's voice did not sound human. It sounded layered. One voice beneath another. The girl. And something ancient answering through her blood. Crimson moonfire spiraled violently around her body, while black runes ignited across her throat and wrists, the same places the temple had chained and silenced her since childhood. The hollow wolf roared inside her soul. Free. Kael forced himself upright, despite the beast tearing through his body. His silver eyes widened as he watched Lyra standing at the center of the storm. Beautiful. Terrifying. Alive in a way she had never been before. The snow around her no longer touched the ground. It floated in circles, suspended by ancient power flooding through the clearing. Selene stepped backward for the first time. No, she whispered. The priestess had spent years fearing this moment, not Lyra's death. Her awakening. Vaylor lowered his massive head before Lyra, crimson eyes blazing with reverence. The queen has spoken. Then, every spirit wolf knelt fully around her. Hundreds. An entire army of dead wolves bowing beneath the storm-dark sky. The hunters panicked immediately. She controls them. Kill her before. One man lunged forward with a broken silver spear. Kyle moved instantly. His claws tore through the hunter's armor before the man could reach Lyra. Blood sprayed across the snow as the king hurled the body aside with inhuman force. Silence followed, because the royal hunters had just witnessed their king slaughter one of his own men to protect the cursed bride. Kael barely noticed. His entire focus remained fixed on Lyra. She looked fragile, standing there in the center of all that power, as though the magic itself might tear her apart if she breathed too hard. And then she looked directly at Selene. The priestess froze. For years, Selene controlled kings through certainty, through prophecy, through fear, but nothing prepared her for the hatred in Lyra's newly awakened voice. "You took my mother." The words echoed unnaturally through the clearing. Selene steadied herself quickly. "Your mother chose death before the corruption consumed her. You lied." The forest exploded. Trees split apart beneath violent shockwaves of shadow magic. Several hunters screamed as black roots erupted through the snow around them like grasping claws. Lyra staggered sharply. Too much power. Too fast. The hollow wolf pressed harder against her soul. "Let me answer her betrayal." "No." The spirit wolves circled anxiously as crimson fire spread across the clearing. Kael realized the truth instantly. She was losing control. Not because she wanted destruction, because nobody had ever taught her how to survive what lived inside her. Selena saw it too, and smiled coldly. "There," she whispered to the terrified hunters. "The monster reveals itself." The council soldiers immediately began backing away in fear. Good. Fear made people obedient. Selene raised her voice sharply. "Witness the truth. The Hollow Queen has returned." The words spread panic through the royal wolves. Some dropped their weapons entirely. Others looked toward Kael desperately, waiting for their king to condemn her. Kael's chest rose heavily. The entire kingdom balanced on this moment. One command from him and the hunters would attack. One accusation, and the court would unite behind the temple again. His throne, his bloodline, his army. Everything depended on what he chose next. Then Lyra looked at him, not as a queen, not as a curse, as a woman waiting to be betrayed again. The sight destroyed something inside him. Kael stepped forward slowly. The corruption beneath his skin clawed violently, sensing her power, recognizing it, craving it. But this time he ignored the beast entirely. He stopped beside Lyra, in full view of every hunter. Then, drew his sword. The royal wolves tensed instantly. Selene's eyes brightened with victory. At last, the king remembered his duty. Kael lifted the blade slowly, and pointed it directly at the priestess. Shock ripped through the clearing. "You buried an innocent woman alive," Kael said coldly. Selene's composure cracked. "Your Majesty, you mutilated a child in the name of prophecy." The king's voice darkened further. "You used my throne to strengthen a seal without my consent. You manipulated the council, lied to the kingdom, and now you seek to murder the very bloodline, protecting this realm from what sleeps beneath the mountain." The hunters stared at Selene in horror. No one had ever spoken against the high priestess publicly before, not even kings. Selene's expression hardened instantly. "You would destroy Varelis for her." Kael looked toward Lyra. The moonfire surrounding her reflected in his silver eyes. And quietly, dangerously, he answered, "No." Then his gaze returned to the priestess. "I would destroy anyone who buried her." The words struck harder than war drums. Because this was no longer suspicion, no longer fascination. The king had chosen, publicly, irrevocably. The spirit wolves howled together. Far beneath the palace mountain, ancient chains cracked louder. Selene felt it instantly. Panic finally entered her face. "You fool," she hissed. "Do you think loving her changes what she carries?" Kael's expression turned lethal. I think fear made you forget who the real monster is. The priestess stepped backward sharply. Moonstones beneath her robes suddenly ignited silver. Ancient runes spread across the snow around the clearing. Attrape. Valor snarled immediately. Move. Too late. Silver chains erupted from beneath the earth. Dozens of them, temple forged, blessed in moonfire. They wrapped around Lyra instantly. Pain exploded through her body. The hollow wolf roared violently inside her soul. Lyra screamed as the chains burned into her skin. Kael lunged forward immediately, but silver spears blocked his path as temple warriors emerged from the trees surrounding the clearing. Selene had planned this from the beginning. The hunters were merely bait. The real execution squad wore white armor beneath moon priest markings, their faces hidden behind silver wolf masks. Kael's eyes widened slightly. Temple executioners, forbidden even within royal law. Selene's voice echoed coldly through the chaos. If the Hollow Queen awakens fully, the kingdom dies. I will not allow your weakness to doom us all. Lyra collapsed to one knee as the chains tightened. The silver burned worse this time, because now, the power inside her had awakened enough to feel it. Temple warriors forced the chains tighter around her throat and arms. The spirit wolves attacked instantly. The clearing became carnage. Dead wolves tore through armored soldiers in bursts of crimson shadow, while temple blades burned spirit bodies apart with silver fire. Kael slaughtered everything between himself and Lyra, not as a king, as something far more dangerous. His monstrous wolf erupted partially through his human form. Again, black claws, silver eyes, fangs stained red beneath falling snow. Temple soldiers died, screaming around him. But there were too many. Selene watched coldly from behind the battle. Almost there. The chains were working. Black veins spread beneath Lyra's skin as the hollow wolf fought violently against the restraints. Good. If the corruption surfaced publicly enough, even Kael could not defend her afterward. Lyra's vision blurred. The silver chains dragged memories from her body like hooks. Her mother dying. The monastery. The coffin. Kael's voice calling her name. The hollow wolf whispered through the pain. Let me protect us. No. You cannot survive them alone. The chains tightened harder. One temple warrior forced Lyra's head upward brutally. Look what your kind brings into the world. Lyra's crimson eyes trembled. Not from fear anymore, from exhaustion. She had spent her entire life surviving everyone else's terror. She was so tired, and for one dangerous moment, she almost surrendered. The hollow wolf felt it immediately. Yes, darkness surged through her veins. The spirit wolves howled in alarm. Valor turned toward Kael sharply. If she gives herself fully to it, the devouring awakens with her. Kael froze mid-battle, then looked toward Lyra. Really looked. She wasn't fighting anymore. She was drowning. And suddenly Kael understood something horrifying. The kingdom had spent so many years calling her a monster that Lyra no longer believed she deserved saving. Something savage broke loose inside him. Kael tore through the remaining temple soldiers with monstrous violence. Silver blades shattered against black claws. Blood stained the snow in dark rivers. Selene backed away in shock. The corruption consuming the king should have weakened him. Instead, rage was making him stronger. Kael reached Lyra, just as the final chain began tightening around her throat. Without hesitation, he grabbed it barehanded. Silver smoke exploded from his skin instantly. The chain burned through flesh to bone. But Kael did not let go. Lyra's eyes widened in horror. The silver should have killed him. Yet the king only tightened his grip harder. Look at me, he growled. Lyra shook violently. Look at me. Her crimson eyes finally lifted toward his. Kael's voice lowered. Not kingly, not commanding. Rough, you are not fighting this alone anymore. Then, he ripped the silver chain apart with his bare hands, and the entire forest went silent. The broken chain hit the snow with a sound that echoed far louder than metal should have. Every wolf in the clearing felt it. A shift. Ancien, irreversible. The moment Kyle tore the silver restraints from Lyra's throat, something buried deep beneath the mountain answered with a roar, powerful enough to shake the frozen earth beneath their feet. Trees split apart across the forest. Snow crashed from the cliffs. Far away in the capital of Varelis, palace towers trembled as cracks spread through ancient stone walls built centuries ago to contain what slept below. And in the clearing, every surviving temple warrior fell to their knees in terror. Celine's face drained of color. No. Vaelor stared toward the distant mountains, with dread burning in his crimson eyes. The first seal has broken. Lyra barely heard him. The moment the chains shattered, warmth surged violently through her body for the first time in years. Not the hollow wolf's cold hunger. Something else. Kyle. His blood. His touch. The king still stood before her, breathing heavily, smoke rising from his burned hands where silver had eaten through flesh. The wounds should have crippled him, yet he looked at her as though pain no longer mattered, and Lyra realized, with sudden, terrifying clarity, the corruption inside him had quieted again, only when touching her. Kyle noticed it too. The beast clawing through his ribs had gone still for the first time in years. Not sleeping. Listening. The connection between them pulsed stronger now, ancient threads tightening through blood and soul alike. Selena saw it happen, and panic finally shattered her composure completely. "You don't understand what you've done," she screamed. Kyle rose slowly to his feet, black claws still half emerged from his hands. "Oh, I understand perfectly." His silver eyes lifted toward the priestess with lethal calm. "You feared this bond more than the monster beneath the mountain." Celine stepped backward. "Because the bond awakens the throne beneath the seal." Silence crashed through the clearing. Even the spirit wolves froze. Kael's expression darkened. What throne? The priestess realized too late she had spoken too much. But the mountain rumbled again. Louder. Ancient power surged beneath the frozen earth like a heartbeat awakening after centuries of sleep. Vaelor answered grimly before Celine could lie again. The Hollow Queen was never merely a guardian. The spirit wolf turned toward Lyra slowly. She was the ruler of the kingdom before Varelis existed. The snow around them began spiraling unnaturally. Ancient runes flickered faintly beneath the clearing, as though the land itself recognized forgotten blood. Kael stared at Lyra. Not a cursed girl. Not merely a seal. Royalty, older than his throne. Celine's voice sharpened desperately. That bloodline nearly destroyed the world. Vaelor's eyes burned crimson. No. Your ancestors did. The spirit wolf stepped forward, towering over the fallen temple warriors. When the creature beneath the mountain first rose, the old kings begged the Hollow Queen for salvation. She chained the devouring using her own soul and demanded one price. Kael already knew. His chest tightened before the words even came. "A bond between bloodlines," he said quietly. Vaelor lowered his head once. King and queen together. Life and death. The old balance. Celine laughed suddenly. Sharp. Frantic. And look how well that balance survived. Her pale eyes locked onto Kael viciously. Your line betrayed hers centuries ago because kings fear kneeling to anyone. The accusation lingered heavily in the frozen air. Kyle remembered the spirit wolves kneeling for Lyra, then remembered his own beast doing the same. Not weakness. Recognition. Something ancient inside royal blood, acknowledging its other half. Lyra slowly rose to her feet. The moonfire around her had dimmed now, though crimson light still glowed faintly beneath her skin. She looked exhausted, fragile, again beneath the power. Yet no one in the clearing could mistake what they had witnessed. The silent bride the kingdom buried alive had just broken temple chains with her voice, and the Alpha King stood beside her, not above her. Beside, the political consequences alone could destroy Varelis. Celine knew it. That was why she made her final choice. If the kingdom sees you together, she said coldly, civil war begins by dawn. Kyle stepped forward immediately. Then perhaps the kingdom deserves the truth. You arrogant fool." Celine's eyes glimmered with fury now. "The Northern Alphas already distrust your bloodline. The Council fears your corruption. If they discover you bonded yourself to the Hollow Queen..." A deep growl rolled through Kyle's chest. "Bont? Cela n'est similette grimle. You still do not feel it fully?" The priestess pointed toward Lyra. "Touch her again." "Silence." Kyle hesitated only briefly before reaching for Lyra's wrist carefully. The moment skin met skin, every wolf in the clearing howled. Silver and crimson light exploded outward simultaneously. The force knocked several surviving hunters into the snow. Ancient runes ignited beneath Kale's throat, while black shadow markings curled across Lyra's hands like living fire. The connection slammed into both of them violently. Kale staggered, not from pain, from sensation. Lyra's heartbeat, her grief, years of silence. The coffin, loneliness so deep it nearly hollowed her soul. And Lyra, she felt his too. The betrayal of his first mate. The years spent chained beside a monstrous wolf no one else knew existed. The terror of losing control. The unbearable isolation of a king feared more than loved. Their breaths caught simultaneously. Matebunt, not complete. Ancien, half awakened. Celine closed her eyes briefly. Too late now. The old blood recognized itself. Kyle released Lyra immediately, breathing hard. Neither spoke, because the truth between them had become impossible to deny. The hollow wolf purred deep inside Lyra's soul. At last, Kale turned sharply toward Celine. "You knew." "Yes." "You arranged the marriage because of the bond." "Yes." Rage darkened his face, and then buried her alive anyway. Celine's expression twisted unexpectedly, not with cruelty, with exhaustion. "You think I wanted this?" she whispered. For the first time, genuine fear entered her voice. The devouring grows stronger every generation. The old seal was failing. Your bond could either restore it, her pale eyes moved toward Lyra, or awaken the throne beneath the mountain completely. Vylor's gaze darkened. The hollow throne. Kale frowned sharply. Enough riddles. The spirit wolf looked toward Lyra carefully. If the Hollow Queen fully awakens, she inherits command over death itself. The old throne beneath the mountain answers only her bloodline. Celine spoke immediately after, and every king who ever sat beside that throne eventually drowned in blood. The forest fell silent again. Lyra felt the hollow wolf stirring harder inside her. Not hunger this time. Memory. A black throne buried beneath endless stone. Kings kneeling. Dead wolves circling beneath crimson moonlight. Then, another image surfaced suddenly. A woman wearing a crown of bone and silver, standing beside a dark-haired king whose eyes looked exactly like Kale's. The vision vanished instantly. Lyra stumbled sharply. Kale caught her before she fell. Another pulse of the bond surged between them. Too strong now. Too dangerous. The king steadied her carefully, his burned hands trembling faintly against her skin. "Eos." The softness in his voice stunned everyone listening, especially himself, because Kale Draven had forgotten how to speak gently years ago. Lyra looked up at him slowly. Close like this, she could see exhaustion hidden beneath his control. The faint silver scars beneath his throat where old bond marks once burned. The loneliness. Always loneliness. Something in her chest ached unexpectedly. The moment shattered when the mountain roared again. Not metaphorically, actually roared. The sound thundered across the northern cliffs, with such force that birds exploded from distant trees in terrified swarms. Then came the screams. Far away, from the capital. Everyone turned toward Varelis. Black smoke rose beyond the palace towers. Valor's expression darkened instantly. The lower seal collapsed. Cela ne vient pas. No? Riven emerged suddenly from the forest edge with blood staining his armor. "Your Majesty." He stopped short upon seeing Lyra standing beside Kale unharmed, but there was no time for questions. "The palace dungeons split open," he said urgently. "Something is moving beneath the mountain." The ground trembled again. Closer now. Kael's eyes narrowed toward the distant capital. What escaped? Riven's face tightened. We don't know. Then, quietly, but the wolves refused to enter the lower city. Silence followed. Heavy. Terrible. Because wolves feared very little. And if they refused the city itself, something ancient had awakened below it. Valor looked toward Lyra. The devouring calls to you now. The hollow wolf stirred immediately at those words. Come home. Lyra's breath caught sharply. Kyle felt it through the bond. The pull. Ancient and monstrous. Something beneath the mountain recognized her blood and wanted its queen returned. The king's expression darkened instantly. No. Everyone looked at him. Kael stepped closer to Lyra protectively. You are not facing that thing alone. The hollow wolf laughed softly inside Lyra's mind. Poor king. It already belongs to us both now. And deep beneath the mountain below Varelis, one enormous golden eye opened fully in the dark. By the time they reached Varelis, the kingdom had already begun tearing itself apart. The capital was built in layers upon the mountain, noble districts above, market streets below, and beneath everything the ancient stone labyrinth sealed by the first kings centuries ago. Most citizens believed those tunnels were abandoned catacombs. They were wrong. Black smoke curled upward from broken streets as Kael rode through the city gates with Lyra behind him beneath a heavy fur cloak. Royal guards cleared the roads ahead, but panic moved faster than authority now. People screamed prayers from windows. Shops stood abandoned. Wolves whined and refused commands from their handlers. And everywhere, the same rumor spread through the city like disease. The dead queen had returned. Lyra kept her hood lowered as they passed, but she could still feel the stares. Fear followed her through the streets like cold rain, not hatred this time. Something worse. Expectation. The spirit wolves moved silently across rooftops above them, unseen by ordinary eyes yet sensed by every living wolf in the city. Their presence unsettled, the horses enough that several nearly threw riders into the snow. Kael rode ahead in silence, but Lyra could feel the tension burning through him via the half-awakened bond. His wolf paced violently beneath the surface again, reacting to the creature stirring below the mountain. Every moment they moved closer to the palace, the corruption inside him worsened. The devouring was calling to him too now, not as loudly, but enough. Riven guided them through the inner gates quickly, while soldiers barricaded streets behind them. The lower city collapsed an hour ago, he reported grimly. Temple guards sealed the entrances, but something keeps dragging men into the tunnels. Kael's expression hardened. Casualties? 47 confirmed. Lyra saw the flicker of pain cross his face before control buried it again. Kings were not allowed grief. Not publicly. The palace courtyard erupted into chaos the moment they entered. Nobles argued beneath torchlight, while servants rushed supplies through the snow-covered halls. Injured wolves lay wrapped in blankets near the stairs, many refusing treatment because they kept snarling at shadows no one else could see. Then, the courtyard fell silent, because they saw her. Lyra stepped down from the horse slowly, cloak shifting around the white burial gown still visible beneath. A whisper moved through the crowd instantly. She's alive. The coffin. Moon preserve us. One older noblewoman crossed herself in terror when crimson-eyed spirit wolves appeared behind Lyra on the palace steps. Kael noticed the panic immediately. Good. Let them fear. For too long, the court feared the wrong monster. High above the courtyard, the royal council watched from the balcony chamber. Several lords looked ready to flee entirely when they saw Lyra standing openly beside the king. Only one seemed furious enough to ignore fear. Lord Arden, Kyle's uncle, tall, silver-haired, dressed in dark ceremonial armor beneath the crimson cloak of House Draven, and smiling. Lyra felt danger from him immediately. Not loud danger like Celine. Sharper. Passion. Lord Arden descended the palace stairs slowly, hands folded behind his back as though the kingdom were not collapsing beneath them. Nephew, he greeted calmly. Kael's jaw tightened. You should be organizing evacuations. And leave the capital leaderless? Arden's eyes moved toward Lyra. Interesting. No fear. Only calculation. The dead bride returns at a convenient time. Kyle stepped slightly in front of Lyra, before he realized he was doing it. Arden noticed. Of course he noticed. The older alpha smiled faintly. Dangerous understanding flickered through his expression. You touched her. The courtyard went still again. Kale's voice lowered dangerously. Careful. But Arden only studied him more closely. The black veins beneath Kyle's throat had retreated. The corruption looked weaker. That alone confirmed everything Arden feared. The old bond was awakening, which meant Kale's rule might soon become unbreakable. Unless, Arden's gaze shifted toward Lyra thoughtfully, unless she died first. A deep growl rolled through Valor's spirit pack overhead. The older lord ignored it. The council demands answers, Arden said smoothly. The city believes the Hollow Queen awakened the disaster beneath the mountain. Lyra stiffena. Kyle immediately answered. The temple weakened the seal. Perhaps. Arden clasped his hands together. But perception governs kingdoms more than truth. Riven muttered darkly under his breath. Everyone knew what Arden meant. Fearful citizens needed someone to blame. And a dead bride carrying forbidden magic made a far easier target than ancient political corruption. Kale stepped toward his uncle slowly. Say what you truly want. Arden's pale eyes sharpened. Very well. The older alpha looked directly at Lyra. If the creature beneath the mountain calls to her blood, then she must descend into the seal chamber. The courtyard erupted instantly. No, that's madness. She'll awaken it fully. Arden raised one hand calmly, or she will restore the seal. Silence fell again, because no one could deny the possibility. Lyra's chest tightened. The devouring called to her constantly now. She felt it beneath the stone city like a second heartbeat. Hungry, ancient, waiting. Part of her feared Arden was right. Maybe only her blood could stop it. But another part feared something worse. What if the monster recognized her because she belonged to it? Kale's voice cut through the silence immediately. She isn't going anywhere. Arden looked almost amused. You would doom the city for one woman? The king's silver eyes darkened lethally. She is not one woman. The words slipped out before Kale could stop them. The courtyard froze. Arden's smile faded slowly. Because now he knew. Not suspicion. Not political alliance. The king had bonded himself emotionally already. Dangerous. Very dangerous. Lyra felt the shift, too. The bond pulsed warmer between them. Kale noticed her looking at him, and immediately hardened again. Too late. The entire court saw. Arden's voice cooled noticeably. The throne clouds your judgment. Kale stepped forward. No. Fear clouded yours. For one sharp moment, violence nearly erupted between them. Then the mountain shook again. A deep cracking sound thundered beneath the city. Screams echoed from somewhere below the palace. And suddenly, every torch in the courtyard went out. Darkness swallowed Varelis. Wolves began howling instantly. Not in aggression. Terror. Then golden light appeared beneath the cracks in the courtyard stones. The nobles backed away in horror as ancient runes ignited under the palace itself. Lyra froze. Because she recognized them. Not from memory. From instinct. The hollow throne awakens. The voice inside her no longer sounded entirely like the hollow wolf now. It sounded like many voices layered together. Queens. Dead queens. Kyle reached for her immediately as the ground trembled harder. The bond surged violently the moment their hands touched. And suddenly, they both saw it. A throne buried beneath endless black stone. Massive chains stretching across an abyss. And something colossal, moving below them in the dark. Golden eyes. Too many teeth. A shape large enough to swallow kingdoms. Then another figure appeared in the vision. A woman wearing a crown of bone and moonlight. Her face looked exactly like Lyra's. She turned slowly toward Kale and whispered, "He must choose." The vision shattered instantly. Kale staggered sharply. Lyra nearly collapsed beside him. The courtyard returned around them in violent chaos. The golden runes beneath the stone faded, but the silence afterward felt even worse, because everyone had seen something. Not clearly, but enough. Enough to understand the old magic beneath the mountain was no myth. Arden recovered first. His eyes locked onto Lyra immediately. What did it show you? Kale answered before she could. Nothing. A lie. A terrible lie. Arden recognized it instantly. So did Celine, who suddenly emerged from the palace shadows with blood staining the hem of her robes. The throne is calling her, the priestess said hoarsely. No one had even seen her arrive. She looked exhausted now, frightened in a way Lyra had never imagined possible. Celine's eyes fixed on Lyra, with grim certainty. If she reaches the hollow throne before the seal stabilizes, the priestess swallowed hard. She will either save Varelis. Her gaze moved toward Kyle slowly, or become the last queen this kingdom ever kneels to. Silence. Then, from deep beneath the palace, something slammed against the ancient chains hard enough to crack the city walls. And this time, a voice echoed upward through the mountain. Not in words, in hunger. Every wolf in Varelis collapsed, screaming, except Lyra and Kale. The scream of the city lasted long after the sound beneath the mountain faded. Wolves collapsed across the capital, clutching their heads in agony, while citizens fled into temples and alleyways praying to gods that no longer answered. Even royal guards struggled to remain standing. Only 2 people in the courtyard remained untouched. Lyra and Kale. The realization spread through the nobles, like poison. The bond between them had become undeniable now. Ancient magic recognized them both. Celine looked almost sick as she watched the pair standing together amid the chaos. The seal no longer distinguishes between king and queen, she whispered. Arden's expression darkened instantly. Political fear sharpened behind his eyes. Because if the kingdom saw Kale and Lyra as the reborn rulers of the old bloodline, the throne would belong to them absolutely. No council, no temple. No rival alpha would ever control Varelis again, unless one of them died first. Kale sensed the shift in his uncle immediately. His silver eyes narrowed dangerously. But before he could speak, another violent tremor split through the courtyard. Stone cracked beneath their feet as black smoke burst upward from the lower tunnels beneath the palace. This time the screams came from below. Soldiers. Dozens. Riven rushed toward the shattered stairwell immediately, sword drawn. Seal the lower gates. A blood-covered guard stumbled upward from the darkness before anyone could move. Half his armor was gone. Deep claw marks tore across his chest. But what terrified the courtyard most were his eyes. Solid gold. The chains. The soldier whispered weakly. Blood spilled from his mouth. It's climbing. Then his body suddenly twisted. Bones cracked violently beneath skin. The courtyard erupted in panic as the guard transformed not into a wolf, into something wrong. Black fur burst from his flesh while golden veins spread across his body like molten fire. His jaw split unnaturally wide. A corrupted wolf. The devouring's influence had reached the living. Temple warriors attacked instantly, silver blades flashing through the courtyard. The creature tore 2 men apart before Kale reached it. The king shifted mid-motion. His monstrous wolf exploded outward with terrifying violence, black claws ripping through the corrupted beast's spine before it could reach the civilians. Blood splattered across the snow. Silence followed. Kale stood over the corpse, breathing heavily, silver eyes burning brighter than before. Then the body beneath him began dissolving, not into flesh, into shadow. The darkness sank directly into the cracks beneath the courtyard stones. Returning below, Selena went pale. It's spreading faster. Valor appeared beside Lyra immediately. The devouring tests the seal, through weaker minds first. Kyle returned to human form slowly, blood dripping from clawed hands. Can it be stopped? The spirit wolf's crimson eyes moved toward Lyra. Only by the throne. Every gaze in the courtyard shifted to her. Lyra felt the weight of it instantly. Expectation, fear, hope. The same kingdom that buried her alive now stared at her like salvation. It made her feel sick. Arden stepped forward carefully. Then we descend now. Kael immediately turned toward him. No. The older alpha's patience snapped slightly. The city is collapsing, and throwing her at the throne blind could destroy all of Varelis. Selene spoke quietly. He's right. Everyone looked shocked. The priestess closed her eyes briefly before continuing. The hollow throne cannot be approached recklessly. The devouring feeds on fear, grief, betrayal. If Lyra loses herself while connected to the throne, she did not finish. She didn't need to. Kael looked toward Lyra carefully. The bond carried too much between them now to ignore. He could feel her exhaustion. Her terror. The way she kept bracing herself for everyone around her to eventually decide she was too dangerous to live. And gods, help him. He understood that feeling too well. Arden noticed the look passing between them and made his choice. Enough. He could not allow this bond to deepen further. Not if he wanted the throne. The older lord stepped closer to the council guards. Escort the girl below. Kyle's head snapped toward him. No one moved. Because the king's expression had turned lethal, Arden's voice hardened. This is no longer about personal attachment. The throne must survive. Kael stepped forward slowly. And if I refuse, then perhaps the council chooses a king capable of putting Varelis first. The courtyard froze. Even the wind seemed to stop, because everyone understood what Arden had just threatened. A coup. Riven moved subtly toward Kael's side. Temple warriors shifted uneasily. The city shook again beneath them, and Lyra suddenly realized the horrifying truth. The kingdom was about to split apart, while the devouring awakened below them. Exactly as the monster wanted. It fed on betrayal, conflict, fear. The hollow wolf whispered inside her softly. They will destroy each other before the creature even rises. Lyra's eyes lifted slowly toward the broken palace, toward the terrified nobles, toward Kael standing alone against his own bloodline. All because of her. No, because of what they had turned her into. The realization settled coldly inside her chest. This would never stop while others chose for her. Slowly, Lyra stepped forward. Kael turned instantly. No, but for the first time, she answered him aloud. I must go. The courtyard fell silent. Her voice remained soft from years without use, roughened by old scars and new power. Yet every word carried unnatural weight beneath it. Kyle stared at her. Something inside him reacted violently to hearing her speak willingly for the first time. Not command, trust. And somehow that felt far more dangerous. You don't know what waits below, he said quietly. Neither do you. The unspoken words passed between them through the bond. Lyra looked toward the cracks spreading beneath the courtyard stones. I hear it calling me. Several nobles recoiled. Kael stepped closer immediately. That is exactly why you should not answer. Lyra met his gaze steadily. And if I refuse? Neither of them needed to say it. The city would die. Kael's jaw tightened painfully. The bond carried his fear clearly now. Not fear of the devouring, fear of losing her. The realization struck him hard enough to feel almost violent. He had spent years believing his heart incapable of surviving another bond. Yet this silent girl, this buried bride, had become the one thing his monstrous wolf refused to release. Selene interrupted quietly. If she descends alone, the throne may consume her completely. Kael looked toward the priestess sharply. What does that mean? Selene hesitated, then finally spoke the truth she had hidden for years. The hollow throne requires balance. Valor lowered his head grimly. King and queen together. The words settled heavily over the courtyard. Arden immediately objected. Absolutely not. Selene ignored him. The first seal was forged through bonded bloodlines. Life and death. Fang and shadow. Her pale eyes lifted toward Kael. If Lyra enters the throne chamber without her counterpart, she dies. Kael finished quietly. Selene's silence confirmed it. The king laughed once then. A dark sound. Almost broken. Interesting, he murmured. Arden stepped forward sharply. You cannot seriously intend to descend with her. Kael's silver eyes moved slowly toward his uncle. The throne beneath this kingdom belongs to both our bloodlines. The older alpha's face hardened. You would gamble the entire monarchy on ancient myths? No. Kyle stepped beside Lyra fully now. I would stop pretending fear is wisdom. The bond pulsed warm between them. Strong. Ancien. And suddenly every noble in the courtyard understood what was happening. Not romance. Something older. A king and queen the kingdom itself recognized before they did. Arden saw it too, and hatred finally entered his face. Because Kale had become stronger since touching Lyra. The corruption no longer consumed him uncontrollably. The wolves responded to him more intensely. Even the city's ancient magic reacted to his presence beside her. If they survived the throne chamber together, no one would ever challenge them again. The mountain roared once more. This time the palace floor split open completely. Screams erupted as black smoke poured from the depths below. Golden eyes flashed briefly beneath the cracks. Watching. Waiting. The devouring was almost free. Valor stepped toward Lyra solemnly. Once the throne awakens fully, there will be no turning back. Lyra looked toward the darkness below the palace. Then, toward Kyle. The king reached for her hand, slowly. No hesitation now. No fear. When their fingers intertwined, silver and crimson runes ignited together beneath the snow-covered courtyard. The entire palace trembled in response. Ancient magic recognized them, accepted them. Kyle's gaze never left hers. Whatever waits below, he said quietly, you will not face it alone again. For the first time, since the coffin closed above her, Lyra believed someone meant it. Then together, king and buried bride, they descended into the darkness beneath the mountain. The staircase beneath the palace had not been touched in centuries. Ancient stones spiraled downward into endless darkness, while silver torches ignited one by one along the walls as Lyra and Kale descended together. Their footsteps echoed softly through the buried corridors, swallowed by the mountain itself. Above them, the sounds of the city faded. Below them, something breathed. The deeper they traveled, the stranger the tunnels became. The architecture no longer resembled the palace above. These halls were older than Varelis itself, carved from black stone that shimmered faintly like obsidian beneath torchlight. And, everywhere, wolves. Not living wolves. Statues. Hundreds of them lining the passageways with heads bowed toward the center of the mountain. Toward the throne, Kyle kept one hand wrapped around Lyra's. Not possessive. Grounding. Each time the bond pulsed between them, the corruption inside him quieted slightly. The monstrous wolf clawing beneath his skin no longer sounded rabid. It sounded wary, even afraid. Riven followed several steps behind with a small group of trusted guards. Though the deeper they descended, the more uneasy the soldiers became. One eventually whispered, "The wolves are crying." Kale heard it too. Low, mournful sounds, echoing through the stone itself. Not from above, from beneath them. The dead wolves were gathering. Valor appeared silently beside Lyra as they reached another massive archway covered in ancient runes. You are close now. Lyra looked toward the spirit wolf. What happens when we reach it? Valor's crimson gaze darkened. Truth. The answer settled heavily in her chest. Ahead, the tunnel widened suddenly into an enormous underground hall. Everyone stopped breathing. The chamber stretched wider than the palace courtyard above it, supported by colossal pillars carved into the shapes of kneeling wolves. Rivers of black water circled the edges of the cavern, glowing faintly gold beneath the dark. At the center stood the throne, the hollow throne, bone-white, massive, forged from ancient stone, silver chains, and what looked disturbingly like the ribs of enormous creatures long extinct. Behind it, an abyss, bottomless darkness, descending endlessly into the heart of the mountain. And from within that darkness came breathing, slow, hungry, alive. The guards recoiled instinctively. Even Kyle felt his wolf tense violently beneath his skin. Lyra stared at the throne, unable to move. The moment she saw it, memory struck her like lightning. A queen kneeling before the abyss, blood running from her hands into silver chains. A king standing beside her while armies burned above the mountain, the devouring roaring beneath them. Then, sacrifice. Lonely, endless, sacrifice. Lyra staggered sharply. Kyle caught her immediately. The moment his arm wrapped around her waist, the throne ignited. Crimson and silver runes burst across the chamber walls. The rivers surrounding the throne glowed brighter, and the abyss opened its eyes. Massive golden eyes emerged beneath the darkness below. The guards screamed. Several stumbled backward immediately. The thing beneath the mountain shifted. Stone groaned around the chamber as claws larger than warhorses scraped against ancient chains. Riven drew his sword instantly. Gods, it was too large to fully see. That somehow made it worse. The devouring remained mostly hidden within the abyss, but glimpses appeared between the darkness. Black scales, enormous teeth, fragments of countless forms stitched together like nightmare-given flesh. Not wolf, not dragon, not beast. Something ancient enough to become all monsters at once. And it was looking directly at Lyra. Mine. The word entered her skull hard enough to make blood drip from her nose. Kael stepped protectively in front of her immediately. The creature laughed, a horrifying sound. The chains restraining it rattled violently. Our king. The entire cavern shook. Riven's guards backed away in panic. One dropped to his knees sobbing. The devouring's gaze shifted toward Kael slowly. You bring her home at last. Kael's silver eyes narrowed. You speak too much for something chained. The creature growled deeply. The force of it nearly extinguished the chamber torches. Lyra felt the hollow wolf stirring frantically inside her now, reacting to the creature below like part of itself trying to return. Varelis stepped beside her quickly. Hold your mind. The spirit wolf sounded strained for the first time. The devouring remembers every queen who carried your blood. The throne pulsed brighter, and suddenly Lyra understood. The Hollow Queens had never ruled this place. They imprisoned it, generation after generation. Alone. The realization broke something inside her. All those women, all those queens, buried beneath history and fear. Not monsters. Sacrifice. The devouring sensed her grief instantly. Yes, little queen. Its voice softened, almost tenderly. They used you all until nothing remained. The chains rattled harder. Kael moved closer to Lyra immediately. Do not listen to it. But the creature continued. Your mother wept here too. Lyra, froze. The cavern went silent. Kael looked sharply toward her. The devouring's golden eyes gleamed beneath the abyss. She begged them to save you. Pain exploded through Lyra's chest. Images crashed into her mind violently. Her mother descending these same stairs years ago. Pregnant, terrified. Temple priests surrounding her. Celine younger beside them. And below, the devouring whispering through the darkness. The memory shifted. Her mother screaming while silver chains wrapped around her body. A child's heartbeat. Lyra. The devouring's voice became almost gentle. Your bloodline was never meant to survive this long. Kael stepped forward sharply. Enough! The beast laughed again. You fear truth, king? Its golden eyes narrowed. Shall I show her yours too? Kael's body stiffened. The corruption beneath his skin surged violently. Lyra felt it instantly through the bond. Fear. Real fear. The devouring noticed. Underneath the monster, there is still guilt. Kael's voice darkened dangerously. Silence. The chains began trembling harder now, because the creature was feeding, not on flesh. Emotion. Fear. Grief. Conflict between them. Varelis snarled sharply. Do not answer it. The devouring grows stronger through pain shared openly. But Lyra already felt Kael's emotions bleeding through the bond uncontrollably. There was something he had hidden. Something terrible. The devouring whispered eagerly. Ask him why your execution was moved forward. Lyra looked sharply toward Kael. The king's expression hardened instantly. Not here. The creature roared with laughter. He knew. Silence crashed through the chamber. The throne dimmed slightly. Lyra's chest tightened painfully. Kyle stepped toward her quickly. "Listen to me." But the devouring spoke over him. "The priestess did not order your death alone." The world seemed to stop. Riven's eyes widened. "Even Vailor froze." Lyra stared at Kale, unable to breathe. The king's silence became answer enough. Pain crossed her face instantly. Rough. Devastated. Kale reached for her. "Lyra." She stepped backward. The bond between them recoiled violently. The devouring purred in satisfaction. Yes. Betrayal. The chains binding it cracked louder. Kale's voice sharpened desperately. "I did not know what they truly planned." But Lyra finally understood. The rushed wedding. The immediate execution. The coffin already prepared before the ceremony began. He knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. Kale saw the trust leaving her eyes, and something inside him panicked instantly. For years he survived betrayal, but seeing it reflected back at him from her, unbearable. "I believed the execution would strengthen the seal," he said hoarsely. "Selene convinced me the ritual would spare the kingdom." The devouring growled approvingly. "And so the king sacrificed his bride for his throne." Kale roared suddenly. The monstrous wolf exploded partially through his body again as fury shook the chamber. Black claws slammed against the throne steps hard enough to crack stone. "I would have died in her place if I knew." Silence followed. Heavy. Real. The words echoed through the chamber with enough force that even the devouring paused briefly. Because Kyle meant them. Lyra felt the truth through the bond immediately. He had failed her, but not willingly. And somehow, that hurt differently. The throne beneath them pulsed violently now. The conflict between king and queen fed the creature below faster than chains could contain it. Vailor turned sharply toward Lyra. The throne awakens completely. Ancient runes ignited across the cavern floor. The abyss split wider. And for the first time, the devouring began climbing upward. The chains screamed. Massive silver restraints stretched across the abyss as the devouring pulled itself upward through the darkness for the first time in centuries. Stone shattered beneath claws large enough to crush palace towers. Golden eyes burned through the cavern like suns rising beneath the earth. And the throne awakened fully. Crimson moonfire exploded across the chamber walls, while ancient runes spread outward beneath Lyra's feet, like veins of living light. The hollow throne recognized its queen. The devouring smiled. Not with lips, with hunger. At last. Riven shouted for the guards to retreat, but panic had already consumed them. Several fled toward the stairwell while others froze, staring into the abyss below. One soldier looked directly into the creature's eyes and began screaming uncontrollably. Black veins erupted across his face. The devouring fed instantly on the terror. The man transformed within seconds. Bones twisted. Flesh split. Another corrupted beast lunged toward the group, but Vailor tore through it in a burst of crimson shadow before it could attack. The spirit wolf turned toward Lyra urgently. The throne must bind the seal now. Lyra stared at the ancient seat before her. Every instinct screamed against it, because she understood now what the throne truly was. Not power, not royalty. A prison. Every hollow queen had descended into this darkness, believing she would save the kingdom, and none of them ever truly returned. The devouring sensed her fear immediately. Yes, come closer. The creature's massive shape crawled higher through the abyss. Chains snapped one by one around its limbs. Your blood belongs here. Kale stepped between Lyra and the throne instantly. No. The single word shook with absolute refusal. Selene's warnings echoed through his mind now. The hollow throne consumes queens. On a B1. Generation after generation. And Kale finally understood the horror hidden beneath the old kingdom. The throne of Varelis was built upon women's sacrifice to keep monsters sleeping. No more. The devouring laughed deeply. You would deny her destiny. Kale's silver eyes blazed. I would burn this kingdom before allowing it to devour her. The chamber went silent. Even the chains seemed to pause. Lyra looked at him sharply. The bond between them trembled violently, because Kael meant that too. Not duty, not politics. Here, he would choose her over the throne itself. The realization struck Lyra harder than the betrayal had. For the first time in her life, someone saw her life as worth more than the kingdom's convenience. The devouring snarled suddenly. Selfish king. Kael stepped closer to the abyss despite the monstrous creature climbing toward him. You speak as though you understand sacrifice. The beast's golden eyes narrowed. You understand hunger. And I understand cages. Kael's voice lowered dangerously. You've spent centuries whispering through cracks in stone because frightened men kept feeding you queens one after another. The devouring roared violently. The cavern shook hard enough to collapse several pillars. Valor barked sharply toward Lyra. Now. The throne pulsed brighter, calling her. The hollow wolf inside Lyra surged toward it instinctively. Complete the bond. Seal the abyss. Become what you were born to be. But Lyra no longer trusted the voices inside her blood. Instead, she looked at Kael. The king stood before a godlike nightmare, with blood dripping from his claws, refusing to move aside, despite the impossible danger towering over him. Not because he thought he could win, because he would rather die than let her face it alone. And suddenly Lyra realized something the old queens never had. They were never supposed to bear the throne alone. The first queen had bound herself beside a king, not beneath him. Beside, the balance had broken when fear turned sacrifice into tradition. The throne did not need another isolated queen. It needed both bloodlines united willingly. The realization crashed through her like lightning. The runes beneath the cavern floor shifted instantly in response. Vailor froze. The spirit wolf stared toward Lyra with widening crimson eyes. You understand now. The devouring sensed it too. No. Panic finally entered its monstrous voice. Lyra stepped toward the throne slowly, not alone this time. She held out her hand toward Kael. The king looked at her sharply, and for one terrible second, fear crossed his face. Not fear of the creature, fear of losing himself beside her. The bond pulsed softly between them. Lyra's voice remained rough and quiet after years of silence. Together, one word, but it shattered centuries. Kael stared at her hand, at the woman he buried, the woman he failed, the woman who still reached for him anyway. Something inside him finally broke completely then. Not control, isolation. Slowly, the Alpha King of Varelis took her hand. The throne erupted. Silver and crimson light exploded through the cavern so violently that everyone shielded their eyes. Ancient runes spread across Kael's arms while shadow fire curled around Lyra like a living crown. The bond completed. Not fully mates. Something older. Older than wolves. Older than kings. The mountain itself responded. Far above, every wolf in Varelis lifted its head toward the palace simultaneously. Then Knut, the devouring, roared in fury. The throne beneath Lyra and Kael awakened completely now. Ancient magic spiraling around them both. The abyss trembled violently as the creature below fought against the shifting seal. Kael felt the throne trying to pull Lyra inward, consume her, claim her soul like the queens before. Immediately he tightened his grip on her hand. No. The throne pulsed harder. Ancient whispers flooded the chamber. Queens must sacrifice. Kael's voice thundered through the cavern. Not anymore. The runes flickered violently. The old magic resisted him. Because kings were never meant to interfere. Lyra suddenly understood the truth. The throne obeyed belief. Centuries of fear shaped its purpose. Centuries of lonely queens taught it sacrifice was the only answer. But ancient magic could change. The hollow wolf whispered uncertainly now. What are you doing? Lyra stepped fully onto the throne platform beside Kael. Then spoke clearly into the cavern. No more queens die alone. The mountain answered. The throne cracked. Silver chains running across the ancient seat shattered apart as the old magic rewrote itself beneath their feet. The devouring screamed. For the first time, not in rage, in fear. The seal changed. Not queen feeding monster. King and queen binding it together. Balanced. Equal. The abyss exploded upward violently as the devouring lunged free from the darkness at last. Its full shape emerged in horrifying fragments. Wolf skulls, scaled limbs, endless golden eyes, shadows twisting through massive black flesh. A creature born from every ancient fear wolves ever carried. The guards screamed. Riven dragged the remaining soldiers back as the beast crashed against the throne platform. Kael shifted fully, not into the broken monster he once feared, into something new. His black wolf erupted beside Lyra, enormous and terrible, silver runes blazing through dark fur, and instead of recoiling, the hollow wolf emerged beside him. A massive crimson spirit formed behind Lyra, eyes burning like blood-red moons, not devouring her, answering her. The two wolves stood together before the abyss, life and death, fang and shadow. Balanced at last, the devouring struck first. Kael's wolf met it head-on with a roar powerful enough to shake the mountain. Claws tore through black flesh, while Lyra's crimson wolf wrapped shadow chains around the creature's limbs. The battle became chaos. Stone shattered. Ancient magic flooded the cavern. The devouring lashed against them with impossible fury, but every time it struck one side of the bond, the other answered. Not alone. Never alone. And slowly, the creature weakened, because the throne no longer fed it. Endless, isolated grief. The balance had returned. The devouring realized it too late. No. Lyra stepped forward beneath the storm of magic, crimson eyes blazing. The spirit wolves filled the cavern behind her now. Hundreds. Thousands. Every dead wolf bound to the hollow queens across centuries. Not victims anymore. An army. The devouring recoiled for the first time in history. Lyra raised one trembling hand toward the abyss and spoke with every queen's voice behind her. Bo. The world stopped. The monster froze. Then slowly, violently, the devouring collapsed to its knees before the throne. The moment the devouring bowed, the mountain exhaled. Not metaphorically. The entire kingdom of Varelis felt it. Above the palace, storm clouds split apart beneath silver moonlight. The black smoke choking the city dissolved into the frozen air. Wolves across the capital slowly lifted their heads from the ground, their terrified cries fading into stunned silence. The seal had stabilized. For the first time in centuries, the mountain slept peacefully. Inside the throne chamber, the devouring remained kneeling before Lyra and Kael, enormous chains of crimson shadow and silver fire binding its monstrous body across the abyss. Not destroyed, contained, balanced. The creature's golden eyes burned with hatred as it stared toward them both. You changed the bond. Lyra stood at the edge of the throne platform, breathing unevenly. The power flowing through her veins had quieted now, though traces of crimson light still flickered beneath her skin like living embers. Beside her, Kael returned slowly to human form. Blood streaked his body from dozens of wounds, but the corruption inside him was gone. Completely gone. The monstrous instability that haunted him for years had vanished the moment the throne accepted their shared bond. Riven noticed immediately. The king no longer smelled like death. The realization stunned him more deeply than the battle itself. Valor stepped toward the abyss slowly, spirit fur glowing softly beneath the ancient runes. The old queens were never meant to suffer alone. The devouring snarled lowly. They feared her power. Kael's silver eyes darkened. No, he looked toward Lyra. They feared needing her. Silence spread through the chamber. Because that was the true sin of Varelis. Not hatred. Convenience. The kingdom found it easier to sacrifice women than confront the truth about the throne beneath them. The devouring's massive gaze shifted toward Lyra once more. You could rule them now. The words echoed heavily through the chamber. The creature's voice softened dangerously. They would kneel. Lyra looked toward the abyss quietly. For a brief, terrible moment, she imagined it. The throne. The dead wolves. A kingdom terrified enough to obey anything she commanded. After everything they did to her, part of her wanted them to kneel. The hollow wolf stirred softly behind her. You earned their fear. Kael sensed the dangerous shift in her emotions instantly through the bond. He stepped closer carefully, not commanding, not pulling her away from the throne, trusting her, and somehow that mattered more than anything else. Lyra slowly looked toward the city far above through cracks in the cavern ceiling. The people of Varelis had feared her before she ever became dangerous. If she ruled through fear now, nothing would truly change. The realization settled gently inside her. Then Lyra looked back toward the devouring and answered quietly, "No." The abyss trembled. The creature stared at her in disbelief. "Do you spare them?" Lyra's crimson eyes darkened faintly. "I spare myself." The word silenced even the dead wolves. Because revenge would have chained her to the same grief that created the devouring in the first place. The creature recoiled slightly. Not from power, from understanding. It had fed on betrayal for so long it no longer understood mercy. Kael looked at Lyra then with something painfully close to awe. Not because she defeated the creature, because after everything done to her, she still chose not to become it. The throne's runes dimmed softly around them. Accepting. Ancient magic settled into stillness for the first time in generations. Valor lowered his head deeply before Lyra. The hollow queens are free. Behind him, thousands of spirit wolves slowly began dissolving into silver light. Onebuwan. Peacefully. Not trapped anymore. The old queen's prison had finally ended. Lyra watched them disappear with tears burning unexpectedly behind her eyes. She did not know their names, but she carried all their loneliness. And now, their ending too. The spirit wolf looked toward Kael next. "Guard her better than the kings before you." Kael held the ancient wolf's gaze steadily. "With my life." Vaelor nodded once. Then, dissolved into moonlight. Silence filled the throne chamber. Only the soft rumble of the sleeping mountain remained. Then suddenly, steel rang behind them. Kael turned instantly. Lord Arden stood at the entrance to the throne chamber, surrounded by armed council wolves. Silver weapons glimmered beneath torchlight. The older alpha's face remained calm. Too calm. "You survived," he said quietly. Kael stepped protectively in front of Lyra, immediately. The council soldiers looked shaken by what they sensed in the chamber. The throne's power still lingered in the air like divine pressure. Some refused to even look directly at Lyra now. Arden, however, remained focused, calculating, dangerous. "The city already spread stories," he continued. "Dead wolves kneeling, ancient magic awakening, a king bonded to the Hollow Queen." Kael's eyes narrowed. "Speak plainly." Arden sighed, softly. "You cannot both leave this chamber alive." Riven swore sharply. The council guards shifted uneasily. Even they had not expected the Lord to say it so openly. Arden clasped his hands behind his back. "If the kingdom learns what happened here, the throne changes forever. The council loses authority. The temple collapses. Noble houses will fracture." His pale eyes moved toward Lyra. "You may call it cruel if you wish. I call it survival." Lyra felt no surprise. Only exhaustion. Of course it ended this way. Even after saving Varelis, the kingdom still feared what she represented. Kael's voice lowered dangerously. "You would murder the woman who just saved this realm? I would preserve stability." The older alpha's expression hardened. "The people need monsters buried, nephew, not crowned." The bond between Kael and Lyra pulsed sharply. Wine, Enga, but beneath it, understanding. This was the final wound of Varelis. Not the devouring. Fear of change. Kael slowly drew his sword. The council guards immediately raised weapons. Riven moved beside the king without hesitation. Arden looked genuinely disappointed. "You would start civil war for her." Kael's silver eyes never left his uncle's. "No." The king stepped fully beside Lyra, where the throne's fading light still surrounded them both. "I would end one." Silence crashed through the chamber, because for the first time in generations, a king of Varelis openly chose the buried queen instead of sacrificing her. Arden saw the resolve in Kael's face, and finally understood. He could not separate them now, not politically. Not magically. Not emotionally. The bond had already become part of the kingdom itself. The older Alpha's hand slowly tightened around his sword. Then, a low growl filled the chamber. Not from Kyle. From the wolves behind Arden. The council guards stared uneasily toward Lyra. Then, one by one, they lowered their weapons. Arden turned sharply. "What are you doing?" An older guard swallowed hard. "My lord." His eyes remained fixed on Lyra. The wolves recognized her. Another lowered his head slowly. Then another, until finally, every living wolf in the chamber bowed. Not forced. Instinctively. Arden stepped backward in disbelief. No. The truth settled mercilessly across the throne chamber. The kingdom itself had chosen. Not the council. Not the temple. The wolves. Kale looked toward his uncle quietly. It was never your throne to protect. Arden's face hollowed slowly beneath torchlight. Years of ambition collapsed all at once. Then the older Alpha laughed softly. Bitter. Tired. Perhaps not. He looked toward Lyra one final time. Not kindly. But honestly, you should have let them fear you. Then, Arden turned and walked from the chamber alone. The remaining guards immediately dropped to one knee before Lyra and Kyle together. The gesture hit Lyra harder than the throne itself, because these wolves were not kneeling out of terror. They were choosing. After a long silence, Riven lowered himself beside the others. "My king," he said quietly. Then his gaze lifted toward Lyra. "My queen." The words echoed softly through the ancient chamber. Lyra Froze. Queen. Not cursed bride. Not buried girl. Not monster. Something inside her broke quietly, then healed in the same breath. Kale turned toward her slowly. Moonlight from the cracked ceiling touched silver scars across his face, while the throne's fading crimson glow reflected in his eyes. Not kingly now. Not cold. Only honest. "You do not have to accept it," he said quietly. The gentleness nearly destroyed her, because after everything, he still offered choice. Lyra looked at the throne, at the sleeping abyss, at the wolves kneeling willingly around them, then finally at the man who descended into darkness beside her instead of offering her to it. Slowly, she reached for his hand, and this time when Kale held it, the kingdom above them howled, not in fear, but in recognition. Snow fell softly over Varelis by morning, not the violent storm snow that buried roads and froze blood beneath armor. This snowfall moved gently across the city rooftops, silver beneath the pale winter dawn. For the first time in weeks, wolves slept peacefully throughout the capital. No screams echoed from the lower districts. No black smoke rose from beneath the palace. The mountain rested, and yet the kingdom woke uncertain. Rumors traveled faster than sunlight through Varelis. The dead bride returned. The throne beneath the mountain awakened. The Alpha King descended into the abyss beside her. Some claimed the Hollow Queen commanded monsters. Others swore the king himself had become one. No two stories matched, but every version ended with the same impossible truth. The buried girl came back alive. Inside the palace, servants froze wherever Lyra walked. Not out of hatred anymore. Reverence unsettled them far more. The spirit wolves no longer followed her openly, but shadows still bent strangely near her feet beneath candlelight. Sometimes the palace torches dimmed when she passed. Wolves lowered their heads instinctively around her without understanding why. Lyra hated how aware she became of every reaction. Years of fear had taught her to notice the smallest changes in people's eyes. Now she saw uncertainty everywhere. The servants no longer looked at her like prey. They looked at her like prophecy. It felt lonelier somehow. She stood alone beside the eastern balcony that evening, watching snow drift across the frozen city below. The palace behind her remained loud with rebuilding efforts and political arguments. The council demanded answers. The temple refused to surrender authority quietly. Northern alphas arrived daily, seeking truth about the throne beneath the mountain. And through it all, Kyle fought everyone. For him, the thought unsettled her more than the throne itself. "You disappeared." His voice moved softly through the cold evening air behind her. Lyra did not turn immediately. Kael approached slowly across the balcony stones, dark royal robes shifting in the wind. Without the corruption twisting beneath his skin anymore, something about him looked different now. Lighter, not softer, never soft, but no longer constantly braced for violence. He stopped beside her at the balcony edge. Below them, the city lights flickered gold against snow-covered streets. Kael's silver eyes moved toward her quietly. Riven nearly sent soldiers searching the palace. A faint expression touched Lyra's face. Almost amusement. Kael noticed immediately. And gods, help him. The sight nearly stole his breath. He had seen her angry, terrified, powerful enough to command dead wolves. Yet this tiny, fragile hint of warmth felt rarer than all of it. The bond pulsed softly between them. Not overwhelming anymore. Steady. Alive. Kael looked out over the city. The council wants the throne chamber sealed permanently. Lyra's gaze lowered slightly. Fear again. Always fear. Kael noticed the shift immediately. They will not touch you. The certainty in his voice should not have mattered as much as it did. Still, Lyra believed him. That frightened her too. Kael leaned one arm against the frozen balcony stone. Selene left the palace. Lyra looked toward him sharply. The priestess surrendered temple authority before dawn. His expression darkened thoughtfully. No one has seen her since. Lyra remained quiet. Kael studied her profile carefully beneath the moonlight. You still think she was right. Not a question. Lyra's fingers tightened faintly against the balcony. The throne consumes queens. The words came rough from disuse. Kael's jaw tightened instantly. Not anymore. You don't know that. Silence stretched between them. Cold wind moved through Lyra's dark hair, while the city below continued rebuilding itself from terror and ash. Finally, Kael spoke quietly. When my first mate betrayed me. Lyra looked toward him slowly. He rarely spoke about the wound inside him. Perhaps because now she could feel pieces of it through the bond anyway. Kael's silver eyes remained fixed on the city. I thought love was weakness. The words sounded almost bitter. My father ruled through fear. The court respected him. The wolves obeyed him. Then my mother died protecting him during a border uprising. Pain flickered through his expression. He never recovered from it. So I learned early that attachment destroys rulers. Lyra listened silently. Kael laughed once without humor. Then I met a woman who promised she would never fear my wolf. The bond between them stirred faintly. Old grief, sharp enough to scar memory itself. She poisoned the mating bond instead. Lyra's chest tightened painfully. Kael's gaze darkened. The corruption started after she betrayed the crown. The court believed my wolf became monstrous because the bond broke. His voice lowered. They were wrong. Lyra frowned faintly. Kael finally looked at her fully. My wolf became monstrous because I stopped believing anything deserved protection. The honesty in his voice hurt more than anger ever could, because she understood that feeling too well. The balcony fell silent again. Then Kael stepped closer carefully. I buried you because I believed sacrifice was necessary for kingdoms to survive. His voice roughened slightly. If I had reached that throne a day later. He stopped. The bond carried the rest clearly enough. He would have lost her forever. Lyra looked away toward the city lights. Part of her still remembered the coffin, the nails, the silence, but another part remembered him tearing silver chains apart barehanded, while the entire kingdom turned against them both. People were not simple monsters. That made forgiveness much harder, and somehow more real. Kael's hand moved slowly toward hers, resting against the balcony stone. He stopped before touching her, giving her room to refuse. Always choice now. Lyra stared at the offered hand quietly, then placed her fingers against his. Warmth moved instantly through the bond. Not violent anymore. Steady. Safe. The hollow wolf inside her remained silent for the first time in her life. At peace, Kael exhaled softly, as though he had forgotten how to breathe properly before this moment. Far below the balcony, movement suddenly stirred through the palace courtyard. Crowds gathered beneath torchlight. Noble, citizens, wolves from every district in Varelis. Riven emerged onto the balcony entrance moments later, looking deeply uncomfortable. "Your Majesty." Kael sighed faintly. "What now?" "The city." Riven hesitated. "They're waiting." Lyra's chest tightened instantly. "Waiting for what?" Riven's expression shifted awkwardly toward her. "To see whether the rumors are true." Fear flickered through her immediately. The old instinct returned. "Hide. Disappear. Do not let them look too long." Kael felt it through the bond at once. He turned toward her quietly. "We do not have to go." The answer surprised her. A king refusing public appearances during political collapse should have been impossible. Yet Kael meant it completely. The choice remained hers. Lyra looked toward the courtyard below. Hundreds of faces waited in the snow, not cheering, not shouting, watching. The same kingdom that once gathered to witness her execution. A sharp, painful memory rose inside her. Silver nails, crowds, whispering monster. The coffin closing. Her breathing became uneven. Kael stepped closer instantly. "Lyra." She looked toward him and saw no command in his eyes. Only concern. Not for the throne. For her. Slowly. Very slowly. Lyra straightened her shoulders. The buried girl would always remember the coffin, but she did not belong inside it anymore. "I'm tired of hiding," she whispered. Something fierce and unbearably soft moved through Kael's expression. Together, they descended into the courtyard. Silence spread instantly through the gathered crowd the moment Lyra appeared beside the king. Snow drifted softly around them. No royal announcements followed. No grand ceremony. Only stillness. Lyra felt hundreds of eyes upon her. Fear threatened to rise again. Then, a child stepped forward from the crowd. A little wolf girl, no older than 7, bundled in oversized winter furs. Her mother tried to pull her back immediately in panic, but the child escaped before anyone could stop her. She walked directly toward Lyra. The courtyard guards tensed. Kael remained still. The little girl stared up at Lyra with wide, uncertain eyes, then quietly held out something small. A flower. Vinta frostbloom. The same flower traditionally placed upon graves. Lyra frose. The child swallowed nervously. "For when they buried you." Silence shattered softly across the courtyard. Lyra stared at the flower and the little girl's shaking hands. No fear. No worship. Only kindness. Something inside her chest broke completely then. Not painfully, like ice finally thawing after endless winter. Slowly, Lyra knelt before the child and accepted the flower carefully. The little wolf girl smiled, and all across the courtyard, wolves lowered themselves to one knee. Not to a monster, not to a queen they feared, to the woman who returned from death and chose not to make the kingdom suffer for it. Kael looked down at Lyra, kneeling in the snow with the frostbloom flower trembling in her hands. And in that moment, the Alpha King understood something simple and devastating. The kingdom had survived because she remained kind after every reason not to be. He reached for her hand before the entire court, and this time, Lyra held it willingly. The wolves of Varelis bowed their heads beneath the falling snow. Above them, the moon emerged from the clouds at last, and beneath the ancient mountain, the devouring slept.